Great Tribal Chief. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 526, Grim Bear Army. After 4 years of recuperation and continuous improvement, the Grim Bear Army is not what it was 4 years ago. It is not an exaggeration to say that the equipment of the Grim Bear Army is definitely the only existence of scorpions on this planet. If the arrogant British, French, Spanish, Russians, and Austrians see the equipment of a main division of the Grim Bear Army, they can directly find a piece of stinky tofu and kill them in shame. Well, the premise is that they can find stinky tofu. Take the 1st Division as an example. 4 years ago, a large part of the soldiers in the 1st Division of the Grim Bear Army did not hold muskets but strong bows. But now, the 1st Division has basically all installed firearms. Of course, in addition to the muskets in the hands of the soldiers of the 1st Division, the other large grenades in their waists have now completely turned into wooden grenade. After all, in terms of the throwing effect, the wooden grenade is more suitable for long-distance throwing. As for the power of this grenade with a wooden handle, it is naturally great. Ordinary soldiers basically have no other equipment except muskets and grenades. It seems that the equipment has been reduced a lot, but the actual combat effectiveness of the soldiers has doubled. After all, the Burst Bear rifle is a powerful rifle with an effective range of more than 600 meters. This rifle is not inferior even if it is placed on the battlefield of World War I. In front of a group of Indians with cold weapons in their hands, this kind of bear rifle is simply a bug-like existence. Even if they were brought in front of the British and Spaniards, although these Vasicus were holding Ferguson rifles, they were far from being compared with the Burst Bear rifle. It is worth mentioning here that Lieutenant Ferguson's wish finally succeeded. His fate was finally completely changed after he stayed in the High Tree tribe for several years. Patrick Ferguson in the original historical time and space was struggling to promote his Ferguson rifle. In the end, even he himself died on the battlefield of the War of Independence. But even so, the Ferguson rifle has not been widely promoted. But it's different now. Although the Ferguson rifle that James Jones was the first to trade with the Stone Bear, it was difficult for even James Jones to promote the Ferguson rifle in the country because of the huge power of the arms dealers in the British Empire. He could only promote it in the North American colonies. Kind of rifle. However, because of the participation of the Spaniards, the Ferguson rifle was first widely promoted in the Kingdom of Spain. When the King of England learned that the Spaniard had a new rifle with an effective range that was twice as long as the Brown Beth rifle, and a reloading speed more than twice as fast, he immediately lost his breath. After further investigation, it was discovered that this rifle of the Spaniard was developed by the British, but for this and other reasons, this rifle was not promoted. Then, King George III of England was angry. George IV, who has just ascended the British throne for less than 10 years, is now wise, especially when the British Empire has just defeated the mortal enemy French under his leadership, which makes his prestige even higher. Although his father, George II, died aggrieved when he pulled Bubba, as a son, George III has used his wisdom and determination to defeat the French, which has also washed away the kind of death of his father. Awkward. George III at this time is still very powerful, especially after he completely controlled the cabinet. His power has reached its peak. So under the strong promotion of George III, British history finally turned the corner, and the Ferguson rifle began to be widely promoted in the British Army. Ferguson no longer has to promote his Ferguson rifle as desperately as in the original historical time and space, but the final effect has been achieved. But even if the British are equipped with Ferguson rifles on a large scale, they are still scumbags in front of the Bear rifle. It's just that no one knows this yet. In addition to the firearms, the horses of the 1st Division have also increased a lot. Originally, the 1st Division was a pure army, that is, the march basically relied on the 2nd buses 1-1. However, with the continuous improvement of the internal affairs of the tribe in the past 4 years, the number of war horses has also increased sharply. Therefore, the 4 main divisions and 6 mixed divisions of the Grim Bear Army have each added a cavalry regiment with a number of 1,000, as the main force of the main division. The cavalry regiment of the 1st Division has 2,000 personnel. In addition to adding a cavalry regiment, each of the 10 divisions under the Grim Bear Army also added a divisional artillery regiment. The 76mm cannon that has been fully installed has a total weight of 1.3 tons. It takes 8 people to control such a cannon. As the main division, each division of the 1st to 4th Divisions is equipped with 24 76mm cannons. Such an artillery regiment has 192 artillerymen that control the artillery. In addition to the air school personnel, transportation, and logistics personnel responsible for the delivery of ammunition, the entire artillery regiment has more than 500 people. The number of the artillery regiment under the division is far from enough for a regiment. But the artillery thing is too powerful, and they have a high status. Just like the Air Force pilots of later generations, a pilot can be used to start as a lieutenant officer. This level is far higher than that of the Army and the Navy. Similarly, even if the number of divisions belonging to the artillery regiment is far less than that of an integrated regiment, it is still classified as regiment level. So, what the Bighorn Sheep said just now is not exaggerated at all. Even if there are more than 10,000 people from the opposite side of the Alenas blocked on the way forward, as long as the division's gun regiment is pulled out, and 3 or 4 rounds of volleys are randomly fired, it is enough to directly break the Alenas. The power of this 76mm cannon is much more powerful than that of a mortar of the same caliber. www.wuxiaspa.com. If it is on a plane without any obstructions, this thing will drop a cannonball within a radius of 20 meters. There is no one standing. The area covered by the 24-76 guns is not that big if they fire in a salvo. The most important thing is that this thing has a long range. Launched from a location far away from the enemy, it can blow up the enemy in a few rounds. Not to mention these backward Indians, even Europeans would never expect that there would be artillery capable of firing more than 5 kilometers at this time. So, the Bighorn Sheep really didn't say this again. It's just that Shi Xiong didn't want to just smash the precious shells on his own head. Although the Alenas had shown a stubborn resistance, Shi Xiong really didn't want to drive them to death. Again, the current population of North American Indians is too small. It's too late for Shi Xiong to cherish it, so how can he be willing to kill people like this? So Shi Xiong simply rejected the Bighorn Sheep's proposal, even if he knows that the Bighorn Sheep's proposal is correct, even if he knows that if he follows the Bighorn Sheep's proposal, it will quickly solve the Alena. It's still the same purpose. Try not to kill as much as possible without killing. Intimidation is the main thing. Shi Xiong thought for a moment. Try not to shroud the main force of the Alena within the bombing range of the artillery regiment. Ishikama thought for a while and said, "You can wipe a little bit to scare those guys." Chapter 527, Grim Bear's spokesperson. Comrade Laoshi feels very helpless now, and can only stand outside the big tent to look at the sky. The guy who moves like him is step. That's right, the violent bear army has changed drastically over the past 4 years, and its strength has doubled. Shi Xiong also wanted to use this northern expedition to gain another wave of prestige. In the end, although the enemy was different, the result was the same drop. "Damn, you can hold on for a while," Shi Xiong muttered, spit out the cigarette in his mouth, shook his head and waved to the guards standing around. These guards immediately began to pack up their big tents. The so-called result is the same, that is, the process of defeating these Alans is the same as the process of defeating the Creeks, Osages, Comanche, Cheyenne, and Sioux. If there is any difference, it is that the hostile people have changed, and then the weapons used to scare them have changed from the Grenadier and 55 mortar of the year to the current 76 cannon. The divisional artillery regiment selected the position according to the instructions of the big boss. 24 76 cannons lined up, waiting for the observer in the air to send back a signal. Because the hot air balloon did not have any natural enemies at this time, The Divisional Artillery Regiment did not need to send observers to risk the danger and sneak into a position very close to the enemy to set up the artillery position. Now every Divisional Artillery Regiment has a hot air balloon. When the artillery position is deployed, the hot air balloon will lift off in place, and then hover at an altitude of 300 to 500 meters. The observer standing in the hanging basket will use the developed high multiplier artillery to observe the enemy's situation. After determining the enemy's position and distance, the observer will test fire the lower artillery through the individual radio station, and then determine the final shooting coordinates based on the test shot. These things have been trained countless times by artillery in the previous 4 years. Although live ammunition training is rarely carried out, the relevant steps have been trained to the bones. Therefore, after the 2476 cannons belonging to the division's artillery regiment were deployed, the observers in the sky had also sent back the position and coordinates. Not long after a test shot was launched, the specific shooting coordinates were sent back again. And then the 2476 cannons were divided into 2 groups, 12 in each group, facing each other about 5 kilometers away from the local position. The respective shooting coordinates fired 3 consecutive volleys. The observer who was flying in a hot air balloon at an altitude of 500 meters immediately spread the news to the ground again. The alien on the opposite side collapsed after being killed more than a dozen people. This is the same result as different enemies. Even Shi Xiong wondered if he had pulled out 5 divisions to deal with these weak tribes in the north, whether they were using anti-aircraft guns to beat mosquitoes. Isn't this alien guy really awesome? How come you can't help but fight? Of course, what to gain a wave of prestige, what enemies can't help but fight. These are all boring thoughts when Shi Xiong feels very invincible. In fact, Shi Xiong knew very well that given the current strength of the Grim Bear army, it was really a horizontal push on this continent. If the warship secretly developed by the shipyard on the Norfolk port that uses steam engines as power and steel shells can really be launched, in terms of the current strength of the Grim Bear army, let alone the New World of North America, even Europe can push flat. It's better to calm the north side first, and then take advantage of the War of Independence to take down the entire North America. I have been wearing my soul for 11 years. And I have been waiting hard for development. Isn't it just for this time? Shi Xiong looked at it. The guards who were packing up the big tent not far away mumbled to themselves. The big horn sheep ran over, with an uncontrollable smile on his face while pulling his ears, and said, "Boss, our artillery group is so powerful, but this movement is too loud." They all thought buzzingly. I have been following Shi Xiong for so long, and some of the words of later generations that Shi Xiong inadvertently revealed have been learned by this guy, such as the word Kili. Shi Xiong waved his hand lazily and said, "Don't be excited, just our strength. Hitting this group of guys is like bullying a little baby. What is there to be happy about? Head, shall we just push it like this in the next step?" Shi Xiong thought for a while and nodded. "Well, after the East Route Army and the West Route Army are all in place, we will communicate with each other by radio, and then we will push it all the way. Who dares to stand in the way? Use the artillery regiment to bombard his mother first, then let the cavalry of each division and the guards go up and catch it." The bighorn sheep rubbed his hands and said excitedly, "Okay, then I'll make arrangements like that." Ishikama glared at the sky angrily and said, "You are the commander of the Grim Bear army, okay? Don't bother me with such trivial things." As he said, Shi Xiong slapped Tep's head fiercely, and shook his head dissatisfied with Tep. The big horn sheep went away again. Stone Xiong slapped the bear's head while sitting sideways and said to Tep, who was standing about the same height as himself, "You talk about these guys, now they are becoming more and more unethical. Now, it's better to be our Tep." Tep can still understand the compliments of the old man. www.wuxiaspa.com. It sticks out his big tongue and licks the big palm of his old man, and draws the stone bear's brow. Tep is now completely an adult male big brown bear, thanks to the absence of any natural enemies, and no hunters daring to attack it, plus the ones who ate and slept well on weekdays. This guy's size has become extremely big now. Later generations of stone bears have heard that the largest Kodiak brown bear can weigh up to 800 kilograms. Although Tep is not a subspecies of Kodiak, it is now larger than most Kodiak brown bears. This guy stands upright and is nearly 3 meters tall, weighing close to 1 ton. If the bear's head is bare, the steel pin-like hair can barely endure, but if Tep's big tongue is licked, the barbs on its tongue are really no different from the hard brushing of a steel brush. Now, painted on the flag of the Grim Bear Army is a portrait of Tep with his mouth open and roaring. What about the Violent Bear Army? If there is no real Violent Bear as the spokesperson, what would it be worth? Tep is 10 years old, but Sheila, who used to feed Tep with her own milk, is already 13 years old. In terms of the dog's age, the 13-year-old Sheila was no different from the 90-year-old man, so she did not follow the old one who was unable to move during the northern expedition. Shi Xiong doesn't know if he will see Sheila after the northern expedition is over. It seems that I don't feel like licking the old man's hand. Tep opened his mouth wide open up to the sky, and then roared twice in his throat. Then he walked forward slowly on all fours, and the sea kept turning his head to look at the old man. Dad? That seems to mean, Father, let's go and catch the wild wolf together. Chapter 528, Strategic Intent. Although the Elena is also a very tyrannical tribe, they can only be terracotta dogs in front of the Grim Bear Army. Especially after the first battle, all the soldiers of the Grim Bear Army understood that the stubborn tribe in front of them was actually a paper tiger. The current Violent Bear Army is like a large road roller slowly advancing. Although it is slow, it does not stop for a moment, and the Elena is a small stone in front of this roller. Their fate is doomed. Either they will be crushed by this roller, or they will be deeply pressed into the ground by this roller. But the soldiers of the Grim Bear Army, including the Bighorn Sheep, are very puzzled by the Big Boss' slow attack strategy. Obviously, it can be crushed quickly, so why are you dragging it away? The Bighorn Sheep and Kuim asked Shi Xiong, but Shi Xiong was silent. The commanders of several other divisions also inquired via radio, but Shi Xiong still laughed and said nothing. After converging, the army moved forward slowly along the east bank of the Mi River. Because of the dense river, the Cherokee people with sufficient inland water capacity do not have to worry about logistical supplies at all. Therefore, although the marching speed is very slow under the orders of the Big Boss, the large troops have never worried about logistical supplies. If there is an enemy in front, depending on the number of enemies, artillery may be deployed to conduct deterrent bombing, or cavalry may be deployed to drive away the enemy directly. If there are no enemies, it is natural to advance slowly. The soldiers of the Grim Bear Army who have been holding back for several years have such a feeling. Where is this place for war? This is clearly out for an outing. However, the smart Bighorn Sheep from the Big Boss is paying close attention to the actions of the wireless telegraph from the east every day, and gradually guessed Shi Xiong's thoughts. Boss, are you waiting for news from the east? One night, after Shi Xiong took Tep and started a barbecue outside the tent where he lived, the Bighorn Sheep leaned in and grabbed it unceremoniously. The boss chewed on the grilled skewers and asked the boss in a low voice. Shi Xiong tilted his head and looked at the Bighorn Sheep, with a smile of approval on his face, but he still did not answer the question. Instead, he grabbed a handful of beef skewers that had just been roasted and wanted to let Tep eat, but Tep disliked it, shook his head. You guys don't eat this stuff. I want to eat meat. Tep's expression is so obvious. If he has a smartphone, this guy's expression can be made into an emoticon pack. Shi Xiong didn't think he smiled, and started to eat himself. After eating 2 skewers of meat and 2 more sips of wine, Shi Xiong patted the stool next to him, and the Bighorn Sheep sat on it. Do you know who our ultimate goal of this northern expedition is? The Bighorn Sheep nodded. Iroquois. Then do you know why we chose the northern expedition at this time? The Bighorn Sheep nodded again. That's because we want to take advantage of the Vasiku Civil War and have no time to take care of other aspects. Obviously, Bighorn Sheep now has a very strategic vision. What he said is correct. Now, those Vasikus in the east have fought, and the British have fought with their colonists themselves. Shi Xiong raised his head and looked to the east at the deep night sky, as if he wanted to see through there happening. The bighorn sheep also raised its head. There is a gorgeous galaxy in the sky, red, purple, white, and pink intertwined, which is extraordinarily beautiful. Today is a moonless night, and now there is no industrial pollution or light pollution, so when you look at the Milky Way here, the Milky Way is extremely spectacular. Shi Xiong lowered his head, took another bite of meat, and sighed and said, "This time the civil war of the Vasachis involves not only themselves, but some of our compatriots will also be involved in this civil war." Go with. The bighorn sheep hesitated for a moment before asking, "Boss, are you talking about Iroquois?" Shi Xiong nodded. Although the Iroquois are far less powerful than ours, the strength of the entire Iroquois League is still very good. We can't underestimate them, because I don't want our fighters to be on the battlefield needlessly, sacrifice, so we need to wait for a good time to attack again, and wait for an Iroquois to be depleted before attacking. What is certain is that the Iroquois will take the initiative to disrupt the civil war in Vasiku, then it is destined to consume a lot of power in the civil war in Vasiku. As he said, Shi Xiong picked up a branch and flattened it with his feet on the ground, then he drew a simple map there with the help of the firelight. Most of the Iroquois live here now. The branch in Stone Bear's hand drew an arc, just in the eastern part of the Great Lakes. This place will become the master of the Vasachis Civil War in the future. The battlefield. The Iroquois will stand on the side of the British to help the British fight those Americans. What we have to do now is to slow down the pace of progress. The bighorn sheep thoughtfully looked at the simple map on the ground for a long time, and then cautiously asked, "Boss, www.wuxiasput.com, you mean those Vasachis will put the main battlefield on the ground, in a territory controlled by the Iroquois?" Shi Xiong shook his head. "What you said is right and wrong. This internal account between Vasiku will last for a long time, at least 5 years or more. In the early days of this war, the main battlefield will inevitably be placed in the north, because the French are also eyeing the British colonies. In the north, the French power is deeply rooted. Therefore, the north has not become the main battlefield by the British, but the form forces them to refuse. Don't make such a choice. The main battlefield happens to be in the territory of the Iroquois." After a pause, Shi Xiong continued, "However, the war in the north is completely ablaze, and we have to wait until the end of this year, to be precise, at the time of the beaver moon and long night full moon." The bighorn sheep finally understood that his boss was not in a hurry to attack. The bighorn sheep pointed to the simple map and said, "Boss, I understand what you mean. We must move forward in line with the progress of the Vasiku battle, right?" Ishikama nodded in satisfaction. "Well, then we should take the Elena before the moon of Sturgeon, and then continue north, and take the Chippewa before the moon of the Hunter. After taking these two tribes, we should either spend the winter locally, or take a boat back to Beijing to spend the winter. When the spring begins next year, we will move eastward along the northern part of the Great Lakes, and after we kill the Hurons, we will go straight behind the Iroquois." Shi Xiong laughed and said, "Yes, what you said is very good. We need to adjust the pace of our offensive according to the rhythm of the Vasiku Civil War. This is the true strategic intention of our northern expedition." Chapter 529, The Disappeared Cahokia Civilization. In the original historical time and space, the British had the advantage in the early and middle stages of the outbreak of the War of Independence. Especially in the early days, except for the end of the Battle of Boston, the British forces were forced to withdraw from Boston, but in other respects, the British generally prevailed. Especially after the American militia's strategy of trying to occupy Canada by land was crushed by the British, the American militia really had no advantage in the early days of the war. But it is undeniable that it was precisely because the American militia wanted to take down Canada, which led to the main battlefield being placed in the north during the early years of the War of Independence. It hasn't been a month since the gunfire in Lexington sounded. It is still a month away from the first large-scale battle between the British and the American militia, that is, The tragic Battle of Bunker Hill. Although the British suffered more losses than the American militia at the Battle of Bunker Hill, the British retained Boston at any rate, giving the British a solid port in the north, and allowing the British to continuously send soldiers from the United Kingdom to North America. If the Battle of Bunker Hill was won by the American militia and the British lost Boston, then the entire War of Independence might end several years in advance. However, the key Battle of Bunker Hill was won by the British. If the British kept Boston, they would inevitably go northward, and then join the reinforcements from Britain that entered Canada through the St. Lawrence River, and then went south to attack the American militia. Regardless of whether it was the Battle of Montreal or the Battle of Quebec, it all happened at the end of this year, so Shi Xiong certainly didn't rush to attack. Just kidding, I went to Canada to fight in November and December, and that was just looking for death. Let alone the enemy. The harsh winter alone can kill a large number of people. Rock bears won't let their own grim bear soldiers go to Canada to die in the winter. Therefore, before October this year, it will be enough to take the Illinois and the Chippewas farther north. After the blooming of spring next year, we can kill the Hurons and Iroquois to the east, and kill the Crees to the west! Iroquois knows very well that, as an ally of the British, the Iroquois will inevitably participate in the two battles that took place in Canada this winter. By then, it will be impossible for the Iroquois to even want to wear it. The cold winter and the Kentucky rifle in the hands of the American militia can easily kill the Iroquois. Although the Iroquois are more resistant to freezing than the American militia, the matchlocks in their hands are really not comparable to the Kentucky rifles in the hands of the American militia. So, let them bite the dog first. I will rush slowly behind. The Northern Expedition, which was close to 60,000, moved slowly and firmly along the Mississippi River to the north. 1 month after the Northern Expedition began, a large force came to a piece of land. This land is not as barren as the places I passed by before. Well, it is a bit wrong to say barren, because it also looks barren. It should be said that this place seems to be more orderly than those places passed by before. Boss, there seems to be someone living here before. Kuwema and Bighorn Sheep stood beside the stone bear on their horses, and asked Kuwema, looking at the large piece of land in front of them. Although Bighorn Sheep didn't ask a question, the look on his face was the same. 3 people riding horses standing on a small mound about 10 meters high, looking around the surrounding land. This large piece of land that cannot be seen at a glance is really ordered. The flat areas are flat, the raised areas are raised, and even the raised areas are so regular. This should not have formed naturally, but artificially piled up mounds, including this small mound under their 3 feet. The most important thing is that standing here can vaguely see the vertical and horizontal roads. Even if these roads were covered with weeds and even decimals, the neat lines and their regular layout made Shi Xiong at a glance that there was absolutely a large number of people who had survived here a long time ago. Shi Xiong's heart moved, and a name suddenly appeared in his heart: Cahokia civilization. Shi Xiong turned his head and beckoned to a guard, who immediately took out a map and ran up. Unfolding the map, Shi Xiong found out that he was currently located near East St. Louis in Illinois. Closing the map, Shi Xiong said to the 2 curious little friends around him, "If I'm not mistaken, this place should be the famous Cahokia." The 2 were at a loss. Obviously, they didn't know the name that once resounded across the entire North American continent. "Yes, it's Cahokia." Stone Bear nodded affirmatively, because his eyes had already seen the huge mound in the distance. It is a mound with a length of more than 300 meters, a width of more than 200 meters, and a height of 30 meters. This mound should be the famous monk mound for later generations, and it is also the largest pyramid in the world. Although this pyramid is piled up with soil, this does not hinder its reputation. Although the monk mound is not as high as the Khufu pyramid, its area is 1.5 times that of the Khufu pyramid. It is precisely because the Stone Bear saw and concluded that the mound is the monk mound. I'm reading www.hukanshu.com. He knew that this was the place where the Cahokia civilization was once. Later Americans discovered a large area of civilization in the eastern suburbs of East St. Louis. After investigation by archaeologists, they discovered that this ancient site destroyed by the flood is the Cahokia civilization in historical legends. And according to research, archaeologists confirm that there was a huge tribe in this area before about the 12th century. Here, there used to be thousands of thatched huts and dozens or even hundreds of artificial mounds. The thatched huts inhabited by Indians were hidden among the huge mounds, surrounded by ritual squares used for sacrifices. It is said that more than 50,000 Indian natives once lived on this huge cultural monument. This is the largest Indian city in North America before Columbus discovered the New World. Even before the 19th century, this was the largest city north of the Rio Grande River. It was bigger than Boston or Philadelphia today. It is a pity that this huge city was destroyed by a super flood in the 14th century. The flooding of the Mississippi River completely destroyed this large piece of civilization. Since then, North American Indian civilization has lacked one of the most brilliant pearls. But it seems that although the Cahokian civilization was destroyed by the flood, there are still Cahokian activities here, and the Cahokias are also part of the current Elena. I was a stone bear who worked in a museum in his previous life. Naturally, he is very clear about this period of history. Chapter 530, Temporary Change. The arrival of the main force of the Grim Bear Army near the disappeared Cahokia civilization means that it has entered the core area of the Elena. What made Stone Bear feel puzzled was that even if the scouts under the Bobcats explored dozens of kilometers away, they did not find the Elanite troops. Only a few Elaine people who were old, weak, sick, and disabled were found. The links reported in other news, saying that a small Elaine tribe had been found not far from here. The scouts had brought all the capable people over, and they were now interrogating. Shi Xiong immediately followed. After some interrogation, Shi Xiong realized that the dozen or so Elaine people headed by an old man were a small tribe of Cahokia people under the Elaine people. Yes, although the Cahokia civilization was destroyed by a super flood 400 years ago, this civilization was not completely cut off. There are still some people who survived that flood. These people constitute the present Cahokian. It's just that these Cahokias no longer have the prestige of their ancestors, and they can only live under the shelter of the Ileni. Running, they all ran away, taking away the things and people that can be taken away from the tribe, and only those of us who can't walk are left waiting for death in the tribe. This name is called the Old Man of Shabaru spoke about the situation here with an indescribable expression on his face. Shi Xiong saw clearly that the expression on Shabalu's face was called death. It was obvious that they had no love for them who were abandoned by the tribe. They said that the devil from the south is coming, and the devil from the south will kill everyone here. They also said that the bravest warrior in the tribe can't resist the devil, so if you want to survive, you must follow the Iraqi. The Lenis ran north. We can't run anymore, we can't keep up with the footsteps of those young people, so we can only wait for death here. But you really is this the devil? Shabaru looked at the dozen or so old guys left in the tribe with him who were devouring the fragrant food, and then looked down at the kind that he was holding in his hand that was also presumptuous, involuntarily drooling and scented food. I asked very puzzledly, and then he opened his mouth and ate it in spite of it. Shi Xiong sighed, feeling very sad. This Shabaru and the remaining old people are obviously ordinary Cahokias with little knowledge. Perhaps this Shabaru has been farming and hunting in a radius of tens of kilometers around his entire life. They have never seen outside what the world is like. I have never heard of Indian tribes other than the Ilian. But it was such an old man who had contributed his whole life to his tribe, but was eventually abandoned without hesitation, which made this old man feel very sad. However, Shabaru and the devil that these old people think came from the south, but now they have given them the most delicious food and given them the hope of living again. Who is the devil anyway? With a bang, Kuema, who returned to the big tent, patted the palm of his hand heavily on the table. These Elenas, how can they abandon their people and run away alone? Obviously, and Kuema, who is the same age as Shi Xiong, looks down on this kind of abandonment of the tribe. Shi Xiong patted his little friend on the shoulder, motioning him to be safe and restless. Kuema, You forgot that when we were fighting the Comanche in the southwest a few years ago, didn't that guy who was called the new chief and fled with his cronies after he declared himself the new chief? Boss, that guy seems to be called Duka, Bighorn Sheep added from the side. Yes, it's that Duka. That guy seems to be more ruthless than the chief of the alien. At least when the alien is escaping, he still knows that he will bring most of the things that can run. Tribe. The Bighorn Sheep said quietly again. Boss, that Duka was cut off by the Apache. Almost silent, Shi Xiong waved his hand. Forget it, I won't mention these unpleasant things. It's clear now that the aliens have run away, and they probably had it a long time ago. There is a plan to escape, otherwise they won't run so neatly. The Bighorn Sheep said, in fact, this is a good thing for us. The alien people gave up the site they had operated for hundreds of years, and they would not be able to find a better place in a short time. Without a good place, they would not be able to find a better place. Guarantee the rations of the tribe. Now the weather is warm. In a short period of time, these escaped aliens may still be able to fill their stomachs with hunting and fishing, but problems will inevitably occur over time, especially after autumn and winter. It's hard for them to survive in the cold north. Boss, we should speed up. These alien people can't let them starve to death and freeze to death in the wilderness. Shi Xiong nodded silently. He was also thinking about this issue just now. The Bighorn Sheep continued to analyze and said, there is another possibility, that is, the alien people have already agreed with the Chippewa people farther north, and these alien people may be attached to the Chippewa people. Kuma said, then just speed up and pursue it. Whether or not the Islandites are mingled with the Chippewas, it is not a problem for us. Besides, the Chippewas are originally us this year. The goal of conquest, instead of dragging it, it is better to give them all in a pot. After a pause, Kuema said again, it's the middle of the month of flowers, May, and the summer harvest will be less than a month away. Boss, leave this to our first teacher. If you take a boat along the big river north, you can directly touch the Chippewa's nest. www.wuxiaspa.com and solve the Chippewa as soon as possible. Maybe we can catch up with a wave of autumn grain planting. Shi Xiong listened to his heart, and the Bighorn Sheep smiled and applauded. Boss, in fact, the method that Kuema said is not a good way. Then, the Bighorn Sheep pulled the map and opened it. Boss, with the strength of the 1st Division, it is absolutely no problem to deal with a Chippewa in a small area. Moreover, whether the aliens really depend on the Chippewa or not, the Chippewa will always be our goal this year. So we might as well divide our forces now. Move forward. Move all the ships here. The 1st Division, except for the cavalry, went up the river north by boat to directly attack the Chippewas, while the remaining troops went north by land and attacked the Miamians and Ottawas. If things go well, we can take down these tribes before planting autumn grains. Then we can arrange the planting of autumn grains while preparing for the winter. If everything goes well, our large troops will not even have to return to Beijing. You can spend the winter directly here. Then next year. The Bighorn Sheep's hands drew 2 arcs on the map. The 1st Division can attack eastward from the northern edge of the Great Lakes, and the other troops can attack eastward from the southern edge of the Great Lakes. By then, the Iroquois will have nowhere to go, can escape. Not to mention, this temporary change strategy seems to be really good. Chapter 531, Allies of the Elena. Strictly speaking, tactics can be adjusted at any time according to various situations inside and outside the battlefield. But strategy is really easy to change. This is true both at home and abroad in ancient and modern times. But for the Stone Bear and the Grim Bear Army, there is actually no difference between strategy and tactics. When your strength is strong enough to crush everything, the so-called strategy and the so-called tactics are just a term. This is just like the nonsense Hollywood science fiction movies of later generations. The reason why those science fiction movies are nonsense is mainly because of the plot, the so-called loopholes or bugs, and it is like a child's house. Take the Independence Day that once set a box office record. The smart Earthlings can defeat the invincible aliens with just a piece of code. Isn't this nonsense? Of course, this kind of nonsense can only appear in movies. In reality, if aliens really invade the Earth, To be honest, there really is no chance for people on Earth. Other aliens can allow subspacecraft with energy shields and a radius of more than 10 kilometers to freely shuttle through the atmosphere. You terrestrial people have just been able to launch satellites into a geosynchronous orbit, and even Mars can't land on it. How can you defeat such an alien? Therefore, if the aliens invade the Earth really happen, the aliens can really put the Earth people in 108 positions. You don't even have the opportunity or ability to resist. This is rolling. And for the North American Indian tribes, the current Grim Bear army is equivalent to the invading aliens to the people on Earth. It is really a kind of crushing strength. Therefore, strategies and tactics are really dispensable for the Grim Bear army. Well, if there is any strategic purpose for the Grim Bear army in the past decade, there is only one: to completely conquer all the Indian tribes in the north, and take a look at the British, Americans, French, Spanish, and Dutch. The human brain is turned into a dog brain, and he desperately bleeds himself, and then cleans up the colonists easily. Therefore, whether the northern expedition slows down or speeds up depends entirely on how Shi Xiong, the boss, considers. At first, Shi Xiong wanted to slowly take down these tribes in the north, and then sit and watch the Europeans stabbing each other with knives. But what happened today made Shi Xiong realize that he seemed a little taken for granted. As the saying goes, nights are long and there are many dreams. Similarly, when the night is long, you will have more urine. Therefore, in order not to urinate in the Kang, in order not to suffocate one's bladder, and in order not to get out of other mouths, it is better to take this opportunity to cut the mess with a sharp knife. Wasn't there a tragedy of non-combat attrition due to inconsistency in the Southwest? The ghost knows what is going on in the Great Lakes region this winter. What if it catches up with the winter of 10 years or once in 100 years? Therefore, taking advantage of the good weather now, it is right to take down all the tribes that can be taken down first. As a result, Shi Xiong waved his hand, and the 5 divisions of the Grim Bear army immediately attacked northward in 3 directions. After the 1st division took off the cavalry unit, as the Eastern Route army, it took a boat along the Mississippi River and directly attacked the Chippewa. The 2nd division and the 5th mixed division were transformed into the Central Army, attacking the Ottawas directly from the land to the north. The 3rd Division and the mixed 6th Division marched northeast as the East Route Army and attacked the Miamians. In this way, no matter where the Alanians run, they will not be able to escape the pursuit of the Grizzlies. What? You said that the Alani can cross the Mississippi River and flee west. But that's a joke. Not to mention that the wide Mississippi River is a natural barrier. Even if there is no one to stop it, it would not be easy for the Alani to cross the river on a large scale. In addition, even if they crossed the Mississippi River, the west and northwest are all covered by the Great Plains. Once it enters the winter, there is a more than hell. What did the Alani do in the past? Are you looking for death? Therefore, Shi Xiong would not consider the possibility of the Alani fleeing west at all. Even if they really fled westward, Shi Xiong wouldn't worry about it. The big deal would be that the tribe didn't exist. The cold winter will teach this tribe a profound lesson. The winters in northern Minnesota, North Dakota, and Montana were so cold in later generations. The stone bear really knows. Of course, now it is not ruled out that the Islandites would seek refuge in Ottawas or Miamis in the northeast. Ottawas, like the Chippewas further north, are aboriginals living in the Great Lakes region, mainly distributed in the lower peninsula of later Michigan and parts of southern Canada along the lake. Ottawas first originated on an island on Lake Huron. After landing on the shore of the lake, they developed rapidly in Michigan and formed a certain social system. Like the Chippewas, they also use Ojibwa. From the root, they and the Ottawas should belong to the same ancestor. In fact, the relationship between Ottawas and Chippewas, Miamis, Hurons in the north, and Alani in the southwest has always been very good. During the Beaver War in the 17th century, the Ottawas allied with the Chippewa, Huron, Miami, and Isle to fight the Iroquois alliance supported by the British and Dutch colonists. Although the losses were heavy, the Ottawaians won in the end. It's just that victory in that war was also the last victory of Ottawa. Speaking of this tribe, It is really strange, because since the end of the Beaver War in the 17th century, no matter who the tribe aligns with, everyone is guaranteed to lose. It can be called the possession of the gods. For example, in the 7 Years' War between Britain and France, the Ottawas and the French formed an alliance against Britain. As a result, the French were defeated and the Ottawas could only continue to be enemies with the British alone. Later, when the War of Independence broke out, British talents and Ottawa people made peace and formed an alliance against the newly formed America. But the United Kingdom was defeated again. And the United States, out of retaliation after the military, cleared the territory of the Ottawas. After that, the people of Ottawa were devastated, and in the mid-19th century they dispersed and moved to the reservations of Michigan and Canada. As for the people of Miami, well, the people of Miami here do not refer to the Indians who live in Miami, Florida in later generations. www.wuxiaspa.com. The two are separated by thousands of miles. The Miami people here are an Aboriginal tribe that originated along the Miami River in Ohio. They are one of the Aboriginal people along the Great Lakes and belong to the authentic Northerners. Where they live, there are no beaches, palm trees, no bikinis. The main subordinates of the Ami are the Wa, Pianxiu, Kairatika, and Greater Miami. They have always had a good relationship with their neighbors, the Elena. In the original historical time and space, after the founding of the United States, the Miamians and the Islandites joined forces against the Americans, but in the end they were not able to get the Americans, and eventually the rest of the Miamis were forced to move to Oklahoma reserved area. Whether it is from Ottawa, Miami or Chippewa, the relationship with the Ironis is very strong. The Ilani escaped, most likely looking for one of these three tribes. Even the three tribes are looking for ... But no matter what the situation, the one thing that the Elan did not understand is that no matter where they flee or which tribe they are allied with, those violent bears they call the devil from the south are sure, just crush the past. Chapter 532, North American version of Blitz. The next journey proved Shi Xiong's self-confidence. The Middle Route Army and the East Route Army are led by the Bighorn Sheep. Regardless of whether it is the Middle Route Army or the East Route Army, the targets of the conquest are not far apart. With the effective communication distance of the current radio station, as long as the Bighorn Sheep is centered for dispatch, there is absolutely no problem. As for the Stone Bear, he led the 5,000 guards and the cavalry of the 1st Division temporarily dismissed from the 1st Division, forming the Northern Expedition Cavalry, and followed the 1st Division overland to the north along the Mississippi River. As the three-way army increased its marching speed, the whereabouts of the Illini were finally fully understood. Because whether it is the Stone Bear's cavalry unit, the Central Route Army or the Eastern Route Army, on the marching road, you can always see the Illini people who are dragging their families and walking the wasteland. Obviously, the Islandites were scattered and fleeing. Some of them took refuge in Chippewa, some took refuge in Ottawa, and some were prepared to take refuge in Miami. It's just that they really don't know. No matter where they flee or which tribe they join, their fate is doomed from the beginning. They will be captured by the Cherokee sooner or later and then assimilated and merged. These Illenas are usually based on tribes, with tribes migrating in different directions, and judging from their migration route and itinerary, they have obviously been migrating for a long time. But unfortunately, unless they started migrating last year, they really cannot compare with the marching speed of the regular army. From the core area of the Ilian people to the nearest Miami tribe, the straight line distance is about more than 500 kilometers, to the territory of the Ottawas about more than 600 kilometers, and to the northernmost Chippewa territory is more than 100 kilometers. Take the Eastern Route Army that is the closest to the marching route. For a distance of 500 kilometers, if the Eastern Route Army marches at full speed, it will only take more than 10 days to run the 500 kilometers on their two legs. However, it takes at least 1.5 months to complete the 500-kilometer distance for the Islandites to drag their homes with their own mouths. This has to be said to be the case without heavy rain or strong wind. Once God doesn't give a face, and it rains for a few days in a row, they can walk this part of the road in 2 months. even if they walk fast. Therefore, whether it is the Eastern Army, the Central Army, or the cavalry unit led by Shi Xiong, even if they did not advance at the speed of a rapid march, after only 7 or 8 days of departure, they began to catch up with the slow-walking island people. For these tribes, needless to say, just pack them away. Just send a heavily armed platoon, you can 1 or 2 tribes to stay at the designated location. After gathering enough alien people, leave a battalion casually by radio, and can take care of thousands of alien people. No matter it is a stone bear or a bighorn sheep, they never worry that the aliens who are packed away will sneak away by themselves. This era is not the 21st century. On the Great Plains of this era, there are beasts everywhere. Dare to sneak away alone, it is purely to give those beasts snacks. These aliens naturally knew the danger of the wasteland, so after being caught, they just stayed there. The transport fleet convened from Shangjing via radio will bring a large amount of food to deliver food to these alien people. No way, these people are all compatriots, so you can't let them starve to death. Coupled with selecting a part of hunters to go out hunting every day, it is still no problem for these captured aliens to temporarily protect their lives. Shi Xiong did not expect to capture nearly 30,000 escaped aliens in just a few days. And it really didn't cost a single shot. If there is any regret, it is that there are about 30,000 aliens who are running fast have arrived at their destination. For this, Shi Xiong doesn't mind. Anyway, early death and late death is a relief. Well, although the words mean this, it seems a bit wrong to express it. It seems that it should be run early and run late, sooner or later, all have to be caught. The speed of the cavalry can easily keep up with the ship, not to mention that the westward army is going upstream. Even if it goes down the wind, they can't match the speed of the horse. A 100-kilometer journey per day can only be regarded as a semi-rush march for the cavalry unit. Step has become a burden. Although this guy can easily run 100 kilometers a day, if he runs like this for several days, he can't stand it. So it was put on a boat by the stone bear. So this guy sat on the boat every day, watching the old man on the shore galloping his horse. He could only stare and howl. The fleet traveled north along the Mississippi River and arrived in Minneapolis in a few days. In fact, when you get here, you have already entered the territory of Chippewa. However, the advancement of the 1st Division and the cavalry troops did not stop. Even if they encountered many Chippewa tribes along the way, they did not stop because of these small tribes. This is not the time to waste time on these small tribes. Since they have decided to surprise the Chippewas, they must use the fastest speed and the shortest time to reach the Chippewas lair. Even if the Chippewas of those tribes are going to report, they have to run faster than the cavalry. Not to mention that under the order of the stone bear, the ranger as a scout has been tens of kilometers ahead. Once he encounters a Chippewa who is riding a horse and wants to escape and report the news, he will just kill him if he doesn't say anything. Therefore, Shi Xiong hardly worried that the Chippewa would get news in advance. Near Minneapolis, the Mississippi River merged into a wide river. Stone Bear knew that this river was another important tributary of the Upper Mi River, the Street Croix River. This river was also the boundary between Wisconsin and Minnesota. And continue north along this broad tributary, and you will be able to penetrate the Chippewas' core control area. The Chippewa people are also called Ojibwe people. They are an aboriginal tribe active in the Great Lakes region. They are concentrated around Lake Superior and speak the Ojibwe language. The Chippewa people are a settled ethnic group. They make a living by fishing and planting corn, pumpkins and cherries, and they have a relatively complete social structure. In the original historical time and space, the Chippewa earned the use of muskets from the French and British. www.wuxiaspa.com. Thus defeating the Lakotas of the Sioux Major League in the west and expanding their own site. At the same time, the Chippewa were also the first Native Americans to sign a detailed treaty with the Europeans. However, the Chippewa at this time were still far away. Although they had a large population and the harsh conditions created a large number of tough fighters, the Chippewa at this time was not in the original historical time and space for decades. After defeating the Chippewa of the Lakota. In fact, even the Chippewa who defeated the Lakota was far from an opponent of the Grizzlies. Don't forget, The Sioux League where the Lakota people belong has been completely conquered by the Grim Bears 4 years ago. In this way, the scouts strangled the Chippewa who wanted to report on horseback, and a large group followed closely. Only 2 days later, the fleet reached the upper reaches of the St. Croix River. It was no longer possible to sail ahead, so the 1st Division joined the cavalry unit again. At this time, they were not far from the court of Chippewa. Shi Xiong used the speed of war horses and transport ships to play a North American version of Blitz in advance in this era. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 533, Soldiers Approaching the City. What? The Cherokee have already been killed? Pukaskava, who was hosting a banquet in the royal tent, subconsciously exclaimed after hearing a report from the man who hurriedly walked in. The half-bitten deer leg clicked and fell on the stone table in front of him. This voice made the originally noisy king's big tent suddenly become audible, and everyone's eyes were focused on the short and stout man. These people had never seen a chief who was so shocked. The reporting man trembled all over, and continued to whisper in a panic, "Master Chief, the Cherokee have really been killed, and now they are less than 100 miles away from the king's tent." And the man swallowed dryly. "Those Cherokee horses are overwhelming, and there are too many to count. The Holyoke tribe has completely fallen, and we are stationed there." The cavalry unit was also completely broken up. Hearing these words, Pukaskawa also shivered all over. He looked at the man in front of him and said angrily, "Your cavalry unit has been broken up. Why did you run back?" The man was kicked by the furious Pukaskawa, but the man dared not get up when he was lying on the ground. Pukaskawa started pacing in shock and anger. After turning twice, he immediately shouted, "Blow the horn, gather all the people. Those Cherokees have killed them. We must gather everything, the power that can be concentrated to kill the Cherokee." The melodious horn sounded immediately, and all the people living near the Chippewa Palace hurriedly began to rush towards the king's court. And the wedding banquet that was being held was also completely interrupted, and Pukaskava's eldest son looked at the messy scene blankly, feeling a little silly for a while. Today is a good day to marry a daughter-in-law, and the Cherokee people are disturbed. The royal court's emergency calling horn sounded, and almost all the tribesmen living near the Chippewa royal court put aside their business and rushed to the royal court in the first place. Since the emergency calling horn, which has not been sounded once for several years or even 10 years, is now sounded, it proves that the tribe has encountered great difficulties. At this juncture, all tribesmen must stand up and contribute their strength to the tribe. Soon, a large number of Chippewas gathered in the open space outside the Chippewa Palace. There were men and women, old and young. Almost all of them were able to move here. There were 5 or 6 thousands of people. The Chippewa tribe is a relatively large and sturdy tribe. Their royal court is located near the small cities of Duluth and Superior at the western end of Lake Superior. To be precise, it was in the south where the St. Louis River flows into the mouth of Lake Superior, which is near the later town of Superior. The Chippewa people have lived near Lake Superior for generations, and their court territory is around Lake Superior. Here, only the Chippewa people live and live. No other tribes. Now, the Chippewas, who have lived here for an unknown period of time, ushered in their worst enemy, the Cherokee. And they will also face the mighty Cherokee in their royal court. The Stone Bear, 100 miles away, naturally does not know that the Chippewa's royal court has been completely messed up at this time. He is now leisurely rubbing the bear's head while watching the Grim Bear soldiers catch those in the distance. Chippewa running away in panic. The transport ship can only transport the soldiers of the 1st Division to the upper and middle reaches of the St. Croix River, and the depth of the river can't meet the draft of the transport ship. But here is not far away from the Chippewa's royal court. Disembark from here, gather, and then smash it all the way north. More than 100 kilometers away is where the Chippewa's royal court is. It's just that there are dense forests and dense wetlands here, which caused a lot of trouble for the 1st Division and the cavalry units. Fortunately, the cavalry unit had captured the locals. In the face of the threat of death, these prisoners honestly acted as Chippewa rape. With the lead of these Chippewa traders, the westward army quickly found a passable road. Then along the way, all tribes, big or small, were trampled down by the westward army. And of course they still relied on capture and killing, unless it is really encountering those tribes with iron heads. The westward army will not easily kill them. When approaching a tribe called Holyoke, the westward army was stubbornly blocked by this large tribe. This large tribe with a population of more than 3,000 is obviously one of the guardian tribes outside the Chippewa Palace, because this tribe not only has more than 400 war horses, but also some muskets. As a powerful tribe living in the Great Lakes region, the Chippewas, like the Iroquois, are Indian tribes that have come into contact with the Dutch and French a long time ago, especially the greedy Dutch who imported muskets and war horses into these tribes a long time ago. However, the tenacious Holyoke tribe did not resist the grim Bear westward army's footsteps. To be precise, only 7,000 cavalry troops completely destroyed this large tribe. Although the population of the Holyoke tribe exceeds 3,000, they are really not enough in front of a full 7,000 regular cavalry. The 7,000 cavalry even only used one round of charge to overwhelm the more than 1,000 soldiers of the strong Holyoke tribe that stood in front of them. Even if they have more than 400 cavalry, they are still fragile in front of the grizzly cavalry units with the burst rifle cavalry in their hands. The superb riding and shooting skills and the effective range of the burst bear rifle cavalry www.wuxiaspa.com allows the Grim Bear Army's cavalry to conduct fire-focused cavalry shooting at a distance of more than 300 meters from the enemy. In just one round of fire almost all of the more than 400 Holyoke cavalrymen were shot down, and only a handful of Holyoke cavalry with good luck escaped. On the other hand, there were no casualties on the westward army's side. The cavalry unit of the Holyoke tribe was destroyed in just one encounter, which also completely destroyed the morale of the other fighters of the Holyoke tribe. Then the 7,000 cavalrymen rode in a circle, and when they launched a charge again, those Holyoke soldiers who had been terrified were completely collapsed. In fact, the deterrence of a large cavalry force's collective charge does not need to be small when hundreds of volleys of grenadiers are fired. After the collapse of the Holyoke tribe, which was regarded as the southern gate of the royal court by Pukaskava, the royal court of Chippewa has become the woman whose last layer of clothing has been stripped off. They are about to face 17,000 strong cuts. Rocky Man. P.S. Bowen thanked the 1,000 rewards of mourning Wuhuaxia. In addition, this chapter of mourning for Brother Wuhuaxia said that Lao Mo had read it and was very puzzled. To be honest, when did you hack Lao Mo's computer and touched Lao Mo's outline? Chapter 534, Cavalry, Charge. The population of Chippewa is still relatively large, perhaps not reaching the level of 100,000. But it is definitely not much worse. But the problem is that all the fighters of the Chippewa were not concentrated in the royal court. As early as 4 years ago, the Cherokees conquered the powerful Sioux alliance, crushed the Cheyennes, conquered all the two sturdy tribes living on the northwestern grasslands, and scared the Crooks to flee north. This has scared the Chippewa people. At that time, in order to prevent the Cherokee from continuing to attack north, the Chippewa indeed gathered all the warriors of the tribe and concentrated them in the royal court and the area where the royal court went south. There are even some fighters who have stayed on the side of the ally of the Alien to the south, cooperating with the Alien to fight the Cherokee. Not only the Chippewas sent reinforcements to the Islanites, but also the Miamians, Ottawas, and Hurons who had been in good relations with them. Even the mortal enemy Iroquois sent a reinforcement of 1,500 to the Islandais. It is said that there are also 500 famous musketeers from the Iroquois alliance. Pukaskava knew very well that if the Cherokees wanted to attack their tribe, then the ally to the south of the Alena would be a wall in front of the Cherokees. It is precisely because of the Alenas who are in front of them, that 4 years ago, the whole family of fighters were summoned and waited for more than 2 months. When Chief Pukaskava saw that the Cherokee did not seem to attack after Northern's intention, All the soldiers went back to their homes to find their mothers. Although Wang Ting is rich, he cannot afford to eat and drink for 2 months for more than 20,000 people here. Not to mention that there are more than 3,000 warriors on the southern side of the Ilian people who need to continue to deliver food. 4 years have passed, and the Cherokees have not shown any signs of doing anything. Even Chief Pukaskava ignored the Cherokees in the south. In the end, I didn't expect these Cherokee people to hit the front without making a sound. This is not to blame for the carelessness of Chief Pukaskava. It is true that several tribes had set some strategies when supporting the Elias. For example, if the Elias really couldn't resist the Cherokee, what should I do with the attack? The result is that the Ilian people can go to Chippewa, Miami, and Ottawa. Once this happens, the 3 tribes must unite in the shortest possible time to form a larger army to resist the Cherokee. What Pukaskava ignores is that the Chippewa is too far away from the Ilna. Although there are tens of thousands of Iron Eyes who really want to defect to the Chippewa, they are caught by the westward army of the Grim Bear Army. I caught up on the road. These surrendered Ilinas would never reach Chippewa's territory. Even if someone fled to the southernmost part of Lake Superior, it would take time to reach the royal court from there. As a result, Pukaskava did not receive any news, and then Shi Xiong led the 1st Division and the 7,000 cavalry troops directly to the city. It is obviously too late to summon the warriors of the tribe. Don't forget, the Chippewa people live around Lake Superior, and the largest freshwater lake on the planet not only covers an area of 82,400 square kilometers, but the shoreline alone is 3,000 kilometers long. If the tribe on the opposite side of the lake wanted to come to the king's court, they would have to walk more than 1,500 kilometers just along the shoreline of the lake. That would be a full 2-month trip. The big lake that used to live on has now become the biggest shackle on the Chippewa's neck. Chief Pukaskava regrets it now. He knew this would happen, and he should have gathered all the warriors of the tribe long ago. Even if these fighters can't resist the Cherokee, they can fight it anyway. The frowning Chief Pukaskava looked at the sparkling lake in the distance, and he couldn't tell what it was like. Do you blame the Cherokee for moving too fast? This doesn't seem to blame them, right? But blame this big lake for being too big? This doesn't seem right. My ancestors have lived around this big lake for more than 5,000 years, and this time far exceeds that of other tribes living around. And the big lake in front of us is called Ojibwasi in Ojibwa language. Later, the French discovered this place and gave the big lake a new name, Superior, which means Shinu, which represents the big lake located upstream. At that time, the Chippewas also hooked up with the French fur traders. Even in the 17th century, there was a time when the Chippewas formed an alliance with the French and defeated the powerful Iroquois alliance. The Sea of Ojibwa has nurtured his tribe for thousands of years. How can Chief Pukaskava resent this great lake? Shall we ask the French for help? It's like uniting the French to defeat the powerful Iroquois more than 100 years ago? But this idea was immediately rejected by Chief Pukaskava. It seems that in the past few years, even those powerful Frenchmen suffered a big loss in the hands of the Cherokees. The large rivers originally controlled by the French were taken away by the Cherokees. The French found several places, but the result was all were beaten up by the Cherokee. Especially even if it is time to ask the French for help now, it seems it is too late. The helpless Chief Pukaskava now can only pin his hopes on the more than 6,000 people from the improvised race. Although the members of the royal court are the bravest of the entire tribe, the strength of the Cherokee has spread throughout the New World in the past few years. Even if Chief Pukaskava kept praying to the gods for his tribe, the warrior can resist the Cherokee, but there is always a voice in his heart that keeps saying that is impossible. And the facts finally fully confirmed the unwilling voice of Chief Pukaskava. www.wuxiaspa.com When the 10,000 1st Division soldiers lined up in a neat formation appeared in the distance, when the 7,000 cavalry units set off, when the dust covered the sky, Chief Pukaskava found that the legs of all the tribesmen were shaking involuntarily. Then, when the 7,000 war horses on the 2 wings began to slowly increase the speed of their horses, and then continued to accelerate, the dust covered half of the sky, and the thunderous hoofs of the 7,000 horses made people feel like they were running. Fear is hard to bear, when tens of thousands of horseshoes fall on the ground to form a huge vibration. It is even more for people to fight with each other. No one can describe the momentum of the 7,000 cavalry charge, as if there is a mountain in front of them, and these galloping cavalry can also completely knock that mountain away. The smoke and dust in the sky, the sound of thundering horseshoes, the growing vibration and the indomitable tragic aura suddenly caused all the Chippewa guys standing in front to completely collapse. I don't know who screamed, and then, an inevitable crash was staged vigorously under Shi Xiong's eyelids. Chapter 535, Great Lakes. Standing on the top of the hill where Pukaskawa once stood, the stone bear can easily see the misty Lake Superior to the east. This small hill is only more than 10 meters high, but it is the highest point around it. In the past 2 lives, Shi Xiong has never seen such a huge freshwater lake. Even if he has been to the largest Qinghai Lake in the country in his previous life, he has also been to Poyang Lake, but whether it is Qinghai Lake or Poyang Lake, Shi Xiong the shock is not as big as the big lake in front of me. This is not so much that Shi Xiong is admiring foreigners, it is actually when he went to Qinghai Lake in his previous life, standing on the shore and seeing the endless peaks on the opposite side of the lake. It would make people subconsciously realize that this is just a lake. As for Poyang Lake, it doesn't matter if I mention it. Anyway, after Shi Xiong went once, he was disappointed for several days. Man-made destruction caused the originally beautiful lake to completely lose its true beauty. And the big lake in front of me is really big and unbelievable, and beautiful as a dream. You must know that this big lake in front of you can be as large as 20 Qinghai Lakes in area alone, and it is 1.5 times larger than the Bohai Sea. It is true that the Chippewa people call this Ojibwa Sea. This is really an inland sea. As for the scenery here, it seems to Shi Xiong's eyes that it is really full of original ecological beauty that is difficult to describe in any words or language, especially when Stone Bear admires this big lake in the early morning. In this early morning when there is almost no wind, there are wisps of water vapor floating on the lake, beautifully. And because the wind is small, the lake surface is like a huge sapphire mirror, reflecting the newly rising sun to the east. All this in front of him gave Shi Xiong the feeling that he was standing in the legendary fairy palace at this time. Well, it would be even better if there were a few beautiful fairies. The hill on which the Stone Bear stands is not high, but it is the highest point around. The Chippewa's royal tent is under this hill, and here, only every chief Chippewa and high priest are qualified to stand up. Now, the entire Chippewa court has been frightened and collapsed by the rapid assault of the 1st Division and the guards. More than 6,000 Chippewa people who are scared to pee in their pants are accepting the adaptation honestly. These people will be escorted by the 1,000 guards to the landing position of the 1st Division, and then transported by the inland river armed transport ship waiting there. Go back to Beijing. Almost all the top leaders of the Chippewa were taken in one go. These important figures can't stay here. Their only home is in a large, tightly guarded courtyard in Beijing, where they are neighbors with the chief priests of other tribes. Go with. The 1st Division of Kuwait left only 1 regiment to organize the place. The other soldiers and the remaining 6,000 cavalry were divided into 2 groups, all the way from the Chippewa Palace to the north around Lake Superior and continue to collect those Chippewas people. The other way from the south also goes around this big lake to collect the Chippewa people on the southern shore of the lake. Eventually the 2 forces will converge at the eastern end of Lake Superior. Sault Ste. Marie at the east end of Lake Superior is the birthplace of the Chippewa people, but no one knows why the Chippewa people eventually moved the royal court to the western end of the Great Lake. It may be that there are too many other tribes living on the shores of Lake Huron and Lake Michigan, such as Hurons, such as Ottawas. Even if they are close allies of the Chippewa, they are not their own people after all. Therefore, Shi Xiong estimated that the Chippewa people moved the royal court from the eastern end of Lake Superior to the western end in order to ensure the safety of the nest. If it weren't for the Stone Bear bug, Chippewa's choice would be fine. After they moved the royal court to the western end of the Great Lake, the safety of the royal court was greatly guaranteed, and because of the westward movement of the royal court, The military forces on the west side of the Great Lake were adequately guaranteed. The Dakos who once coveted the Great Lakes, even the Sioux, Crooks, and Crees, were defeated by the Chippewas. This made these powerful tribes no longer dare to attack the Chippewas easily. Had it not been for the Americans with spears and cannons, the Chippewa might be able to live freely in this land until the 21st century. But even if the Americans finally owned this beautiful land, the Chippewas were not forced to migrate to the barren Oklahoma reservation by the Americans like other tribes. These Chippewas eventually stayed in Superior, the reserved area near Lake Rahoo. Generally speaking, this vast and fertile land is impeccable in all aspects except for the bad weather. The various fish produced in the Great Lake can easily feed tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people, and because it is close to the Great Lake, the rivers here are crisscross and the water vapor is abundant, and the land here is also very fertile. Later, the Great Lakes region will be the main grain-producing areas of the United States and Canada. Also on the north shore of Lake Superior, there are also rich reserves of various mineral resources, such as copper, iron, gold, silver, nickel and other mineral reserves. To sum up, this big lake is really a wonderful place blessed by nature. As for the Stone Bear, once the Great Lake is occupied, you can retreat to the south www.wuxiaspet.com. To the north and west you can attack the Cree and the Crow who fled north, and you can also attack Hugh to the east. The Lund people and Iroquois people can be said to have an excellent frontier base. At the same time that the 1st Division and the Guards deal with the remaining Chippewa, they can arrange for people from other tribes to come here. For example, the others who have never forgotten about Lake Superior is disrupted and then divided into groups. This is something that the conquered Indian tribes must experience. In the past, whether it was the Soviet Union, the Western tribes, or other tribes, it was bound to go through this sort of division. Once the Chippewa are completely conquered, they will also have to go through this process. Only when their original order is completely disrupted can the Cherokee's safety be guaranteed as much as possible. At the same time, this will also allow the Chippewa to integrate into the Cherokee as soon as possible. Through the radio, Shi Xiong also knew that the Central Route Army and the Eastern Route Army were also progressing very smoothly. Once the Grim Bears speeded up their march, not only were the Chippewas caught off guard, but the Ottawa and Miami people in the east were also caught off guard. Because of the terrain, although the Central Route Army and the East Route Army have not won the royal court of the Ottawas and Miamis, the two groups of troops have always been as powerful as a bamboo. The pace of the soldiers advancing. It was only a matter of time before these two tribes were completely conquered. Chapter 536. Line of defense. Hurry up. And the autumn crops in 1775 still did not catch up with the planting. Even if the Grim Bear Army speeds up its march, even if the Grim Bear Army swept across the Chippewa, Ottawa, and Miami people in a manner of crushing, it really conquered all three tribes. After that, the time has come to October. Conquering these three tribes was not as fast as imagined, especially the Chippewa. The 3,000-kilometer lakeshore line was enough to make the Grim Bear Army break its leg. Even if later, Stone Bear mobilized some smaller inland river-armed transport ships and went north along the Illinois River, then went directly into Lake Michigan through the Chicago River, then through Lake Michigan into Lake Huron, and finally through Lake Huron and Lake Superior. The natural river in between enters Lake Superior, and there is no way to help the Grim Bear Army much. The most is to help the Grim Bear Army transport some supplies and ammunition. After all, more ships in Beijing only need to be used to transport food and personnel. Starting from Shangjing, some ships headed north along the Mississippi River, and some ships headed northeast along the Ohio River, pulling some tribesmen and food, and when they came back, they brought the included Chippewa, Ottawa, and Miami people to Shangjing. This work alone accounts for 80% of all capacity in Shanghai. Therefore, there is no excess capacity to help the Grim Bear soldiers speed up the expedition. Then, until mid to late October, the three tribes were completely occupied by the Grim Bear Army. By this time, the weather near the Great Lakes has become very cold. From the topography of the North American continent, the Great Lakes is actually a huge two-year. The cold current from the far north of the mainland will always be the first to enter the United States through here. Therefore, even if there are Great Lakes here as a relief, it is still unavoidable that the temperature is getting colder day by day. Fortunately, in October, most of the waterways of the Great Lakes were not frozen, so the Grim Bear Army, which had freed up its capacity, began to deploy a line of defense in the later Salt Sweet, Detroit-Cleveland line, or to attack the base. From the end of October, the 1st and 2nd Divisions of the Grim Bear Army will be stationed on this line as the main force, and the 3rd, Mixed 5th and Mixed 6th Divisions will return to Beijing for repair. The Mixed 7th Division and Mixed 8th Division will be mobilized here from Shangjin to assist the 1st and 2nd Divisions in building this line of defense. The 4 divisions will stay here until April next year, a full 6 months. They will spend a long and cold winter here, which is also the longest and coldest winter they have ever spent in their lives. In order to ensure that the soldiers can survive this cold winter safely, Shi Xiong also came up with many ways. For example, Shi Xiong brought China's Di-Ying-Sai. This kind of house that has been used for thousands of years in northeast China is half underground and half on the ground. The insulation is very good. The people in northeast China have used it for thousands of years and have been using it very well. The most important thing is that it is very convenient to repair this kind of ground scent. Now the Cherokee do not lack iron tools, and the Grim Bear soldiers are even more equipped with an engineer shovel. The Great Lakes region has abundant water sources, and the trees are extremely lush, and there are thick trees everywhere. When repairing the tassels, just find it that is leeward to the sun and close to the water source and dig a large square pit 2 meters deep and large enough in area. The middle is topped with a thick tree trunk that has been felled, and logs are placed on it, with big iron nails. Hold it firmly, then cover it with thick thatch, and cover the top with thick soil, and a ground stubble is repaired. It takes up to 2 days for a squad of soldiers to build such a ground. Once the ground silo is repaired, it is cushioned with dry soil, and then a fire kang is built. A large stove is built. The chimney sticks out from the chimney hole reserved above the ground silo. Once the stove inside is lit, the entire ground silo will be covered. Very warm. No matter how cold the weather is, it will never freeze when hiding in the ground. And after these ground scents are repaired, they don't worry that they won't be used, even if the soldiers of the Grim Bear Army continue the eastern expedition. After this winter, the tribes who will be added later can also live in these ground stubs, which are definitely good houses to live in this area. Furthermore, the winter here is terrible. Even if the length of the Salt Sweet, Detroit-Cleveland line of defense is very long, even the Hurons and Iroquois are not afraid to make a large-scale deployment in the winter. Moreover, most areas of this line of defense are on the shore of the lake, and only a few key land transportation routes need to be guarded to prevent sneak attacks by the Iroquois and Hurons. The Grim Bear Army is based on regiments, and a total of 40 regiments are distributed on this line of defense. There are usually 3 regiments stationed in key areas, and artillery regiments are also stationed in these key areas. With these 76 mm cannons, it is enough to defend an area with a frontal width of 16 kilometers. Although the other regiments do not have cannons, 76 mm mortars and 55 mm mortars, as well as a larger number of grenadiers, are enough to ensure the safety of the Grim Bear soldiers. Even if there is a cold wave and the temperature drops sharply and the lake is frozen, the Iroquois or Hurons walk along the ice near the lake shore, and the Stone Bears are not worried. Because each regiment is stationed in the area www.wuxiaspa.com, there is a hot air balloon staying behind. Even if these hot air balloons cannot take off at night, once they take off during the day, holding a telescope at an altitude of 500 meters is enough to see an area 180 kilometers away. Even if the Iroquois and Hurons want to sneak through the frozen lake, it is not so easy. Stone Bears don't think they can walk hundreds of kilometers on ice in one night. As for small-scale sneak attacks, Shi Xiong is even less worried. As far as the weapons in the hands of the Iroquois and the Hurons, even if 1,000 or 2,000 people came, they were not enough to squeeze their teeth. Facts have also proved that Shi Xiong's arrangement is correct. Because just before this line of defense was fully formed, the Iroquois and Hurons unexpectedly joined forces to launch several sneak attacks. Of course, they were not a large-scale attack, but sent dozens of small-scale fighters to sneak attacks from the mountains and forests, from the shoreline of the lake, and even in canoes. As a result, these sneak attack guys were naturally destroyed by the Grim Bear soldiers without hesitation. The most spectacular one was when the Iroquois sent a team of about 1,000 people. As a result, the observers of the hot air balloon saw it early. The 20-76mm cannons of the artillery regiment were just salvos. In 2 rounds, more than 1,000 people completely evaporated in the world. Since then, I have never seen an Iroquois or Huron sneak attack. It is estimated that their chiefs are worrying about how to resist the advance of the Grim Bear soldiers after the beginning of spring next year. Chapter 537, Heavy Snow. Stone Bear doesn't know what the Huron and Iroquois chiefs think, how worried and distressed. He only knows that he has a very comfortable life, not only comfortable, but also very enjoyable. Because the Chippewas royal court was knocked down early, before the arrival of the cold winter, Shi Xiong took Green Sky Lark and a pair of children from Shangjing, because Shi Xiong wants to spend a real winter with his family. Although the winter was not very warm in the Gaoshu tribe in Shangjing, the winter there is definitely warm compared to the winter on the shores of Lake Superior. The latitude of the Gaoshu tribe in Shangjing is about the same as that of Spring City in China, and the temperature in winter is only 10 degrees below zero. But when it came to the shore of Lake Superior, the temperature of -30 degrees was the same as playing. Just like Shi Xiong and his family's current location, which is the small city of Superior at the western end of Lake Superior, the latitude is about the same as Manzhouli in China, and it is further north of Biha. And from here to the Arctic Ocean, there is almost a plain of Pingchuan. The cold currents from the Arctic Ocean and the Hudson Bay south can come here without any hindrance, so the temperature here in winter often drops to -30 or 40 degrees, even if it is low. Temperatures of -50 degrees are not uncommon. Even if the world is warming in later generations, a strong cold wave will often occur here, and the temperature will drop by 30 degrees within a day. And compared to the snowfall in Gaoshu tribe or Shangjing, the snowfall here is called real snowfall. A heavy snowfall in the Gaoshu tribe or Shangjing, the maximum snow depth is to the calf, but if there is a heavy snowfall here, you can find a place to walk. The snow can wipe out your thighs. If it catches up with a snowy nest, it will be completely gone when a person plunges into it. Shi Xiong remembered that he had read a piece of news in his previous life. It was said that in March 2010, there was a heavy snowfall in Inner Mongolia. The heavy snow gathered at a certain mountain nest and formed a big snow nest, which happened to be bury the train track. As a result, a train from Harbin to Bata plunged into this heavy snow nest, and a whole 15 train cars were buried by the heavy snow. Is that heavy snow big enough? But on the Lake Superior side, such heavy snowfall is commonplace. Especially since December, the continuous snowfall here has blocked everything. For example, that morning when the Shi Xiong family woke up and wanted to go out and wander around, the door could not be opened. The 8-year-old Hekla and the 4-year-old Tatari were confused at the beginning. What is the situation? Why can't my door be opened? Temp is coming. This guy relied on his strength and wanted to push the door open, but the door was pushed open by this guy, but the snow outside suddenly poured in. By the way, this guy Tep didn't push the door open, this guy pushed the whole door frame down. The heavy snow that filled half of the house suddenly broke Hekla and Tatari. Although the two of them have seen heavy snow before, where have they seen such heavy snow? The two little guys rushed over, holding hands, laughing and joking, but they couldn't find them all at once. Stone Bear and Green Sky Lark laughed and cursed and dug the two little guys out of the snow. Now, even Green Sky Lark was happy, and started playing with the snow in the house with the 3 children. The hard-working boss she became a cleaner, but watching Tep and his 2 younger siblings having fun, he just grabbed this guy by the neck and dragged it over. Want to play? No problem, but first you have to clean up the snow in front of the door. So Tepa became a bear tank. This guy first arched out of the gate, and then stood up directly. The height of 3 meters is enough to expose this guy's bare head out of the snow? I have a big grass, and Tipu Guang has one head exposed. How big is this snow? Shi Xiong was also confused. Tepa walked in front, Shi Xiong pushed behind. At any rate, it cleared out the snow at the door. At this time, Shi Xiong realized that the snow almost reached the eaves of his house. This is also a tragedy. As the chief, Shi Xiong is a tall and strong guy, so the house he lives in is naturally leeward to the sun. As a result, Shi Xiong chose such a place when he built the house, but ignored it. It is easy to form a snow nest because of the return wind. As a result, the heavy snow that began in the evening yesterday, under the influence of the wind, formed a small snow nest near the house where the stone bear lived. In one night, the snow almost buried the house. Green Skylark took Tatari's hand and walked out. The 8-year-old Heckle broke free from his mother's hand and yelled to help his father and brother clean up the snow, just like a little calf, inside the snow outside. After being picked out by the old man, the face all became snow. Tately watched her brother having fun, and she looked at her mother with a begging look. The meaning was obvious. Mother, let me go and play too. Green Skylark firmly grasped the girl's hand. www.wuxiasput.com with a sense of righteousness, but her other hand was raised up, seeming to want to measure the height of the outer area of snow, but the hand touched the snow was not stable, and a large pile of snow hit her and Tately's face like this, and the mother and daughter suddenly became a mess, and laughter and screams filled the place. A house. Cleaning up such snow. Iron shovel is no longer useful. Shi Xiong walked back into the house, found a large wooden board from the house, and then started to clean the snow with the wooden board. In fact, this snow is not that kind of huge snow. After all, it is the first snow of this year. However, Shi Xiong himself chose the location of the house not very well, so he was buried here. The snow on the flat ground outside could only reach the root of the thigh. So when there was a noise from Shi Xiong, a group of people came here with tools and began to clear the snow from the outside. Many people are powerful, and without much effort, a way out is cleared out. But the snow on both sides of this road is really almost 2.5 meters high. After going out, Heckle and Tatari were really crazy. The 2 bear kids and a bunch of bear kids outside got together, and it really became a bear den. A large group of bear kids were laughing and joking in the snow. The youngest Tatari often played and couldn't find anyone. Then after she was dug out, the snow foam made this little girl excited. Unwanted in this way, the Shi Xiong family began their first real winter on the shores of Lake Superior. Chapter 538, Winter Ice Project. Because of the stove, kang, and firewall, even if the outside temperature can often drop to -30 or 40 degrees, the house is still warm as spring. Even if you go out, don't worry, because all the people here wear natural fur. Just like the famous stand-up comedy actor Fang Kingping said in his crosstalk that the furs worn by primitive people are absolutely pure natural furs. Shi Xiong and the others wear leather clothes, leather pants, shoes, and leather hats on their heads in winter. The leather gloves worn on the hands are also pure natural fur. No way. At this time, hunting of wild animals is not prohibited like later generations. Modern people in later generations paid a huge price for their ancestors' uncontrolled hunting. One of them was to praise those wild animals higher than their ancestors. This is not allowed to be killed, and the other is not allowed to be arrested. Anyway, as long as it is hairy, I want to protect them all. But now, in the North American continent, in this place that has not been ruined by humans, wild animals are the food in the mouth of the Indians and the source of the long clothing. With the first heavy snowfall, Superior, which is near 47 degrees north latitude, began to snow every 3 to 5. Keep down, the previous heavy snow has not melted, and new snow will cover it again. After a few snowfalls, the entire land will be covered by snow. The vast lake surface also began to freeze. Of course, before the lake's surface freezes, the St. Louis River that flows from west to east and finally flows into Lake Superior as Superior has been completely frozen. Then, the surface of the Great Lake began to be frozen from the surroundings to the middle. Often after a cold wave, you can find that the range of the Great Lakes ice has extended a lot inward. Return to the United States in December, and the stone bears can walk from the shore on the ice to the island in the narrow lake that is more than 10 kilometers in length between Lake Superior and Bay Superior. The 5 Great Lakes are all formed by glaciers, so the shores of the Great Lakes and the shores of the islands and the lakes are mostly rocky cliffs. It is rare to see gentle places, let alone sandy beaches. But this long and narrow island lying at the mouth of the St. Louis River has a beautiful beach. On the east bank of this long and narrow lake island, a long sandy beach will appear after the lake surface is thawed in spring, which is said to be the longest lake island beach in the world. In summer, this beach will become the darling of the locals. Later generations, this beach is also the darling of the locals. The 6 Mile Beach is an excellent natural bathing area. There are countless beach volleyball courts and beach football fields on this beach. It's a pity that Stone Bear has never seen this beautiful beach in his previous life. Although he has seen it now, it is a pity that it happens to be winter. In short, at least this year, Shi Xiong can't bring his wife and children to play here. However, although it is not possible to play in the water, there are still many places to play and have fun in Lake Superior in winter. For example, ice cutting fishing is a very good game. In this season, killing Iroquois and Hurons dare not engage in sneak attacks on land. The cold wave and blizzard that do not know when will come are the most powerful killers in the wild in this era. No one can resist. No one dares to wander around in the wild at this time. So except for the necessary vigilance, the soldiers of the Grim Bear Army relaxed. Shi Xiong, who is the boss, naturally has to take a bunch of brothers with him. Ice fishing is a fun and fitness activity. Although the entire Lake Superior has not been frozen, but within a few dozen kilometers from the shore of the lake, it has completely frozen. And the closer to the shore, the thicker the ice layer. Just like Shi Xiong and their current location, the thickness of the ice layer is more than 1 meter. The thickness of the ice layer is not to mention leaving people. Even if it is running a tank, there is no problem, so everyone can play on the ice as much as possible. It's really not an easy task to shovel such a thick layer of ice. There is no electric drill or electric saw these days. If you want to smash the iron-hard ice layer, you can only do it bit by manpower, so this is really a very physical exercise. But once a hole is cut in the ice, it becomes lively. The fishes under the ice layer drill out of these ice holes just like they are dead. Some big fish can even jump out of the ice holes directly, and then jump on the ice for a few times to end their lives. To use the old Northeast Chinese saying, the scene is really beat the roe deer and scoop fish. Lake Superior in this era is not for later generations, let alone Lake Superior for later generations. The entire Great Lakes is due to overfishing and lake water pollution, resulting in a long period of time almost no fish in the Great Lakes. Later, Lao Mai felt that this would not work, so she began to close the lake to raise fish, and it took decades to restore the ecology of the Great Lakes. But now, there are more than one fish in the Great Lakes, especially there is only one Chippewa tribe around Lake Superior, and the entire tribe is less than 100,000 people. Even if they are allowed to fish desperately, they will not be able to catch the big lake, the fish in it. A bunch of bear kids looked silly on the edge of the ice cave. Where have they seen this scene? Let alone children, even adults are dumbfounded. Most of these soldiers live in the central and southern parts of the North American continent. Many people have never seen such a scene. The only happiest step. It is an out-and-out brown bear. www.wuxiaspot.com Fish is one of their favorites. Tep used to go fishing in the river. It was really too strenuous, and he was thrashing and busy, and he couldn't catch many fish in a long time. But now, there is no need to flop in the water at all. The fish jumps up by itself. Where is there such a good thing in the world? So Tep was not too cold. He sat down next to the ice hole and jumped up a fish. It stretched out its big claws and pressed it directly on the ice, and then half of the fish was gone after one bite. It didn't take much time. Even with Tep's big belly, I couldn't eat it anymore. Shi Xiong is also a bit embarrassed. He originally made a few simple fishing rods and wanted to teach the children to fish. As a result, The fishing rod was not used at all. It was really embarrassing. Tepu is a good time to eat fish, but after eating it, it's hard. The sledge built by Stone Bear himself was tied to Tep again, and the flamboyant Tep who had just eaten became a sledge driver in a blink of an eye. The other children are not idle either, and the dog pulls the sledge as violently. In addition to ice fishing and dogs pulling sledges, Shi Xiong also spent more than 20 days deliberately riding the dog-pulling sledges with his family and a large group of people to the later Apostle Islands to see the famous Superior Lake Ice Cave. This very famous winter attraction for later generations is still unknown to outsiders, so when a group of dumplings from the south saw the magnificent ice caves, ice waterfalls, icicles, ice swords, ice drops, ice towers, ice beads, etc., all of them looked dumbfounded. Chapter 539 Checkpoint. Northland in winter is actually very boring. Well, this is for adults. But for children, no matter where they are, as long as there are enough friends, it is heaven. Especially after Shi Xiong showed them how to build an igloo with snow bricks, the bear kids wanted to live in that small igloo every day. This kind of igloo, where Inuit people have lived for thousands of years, was finally carried over by the Stone Bear shamelessly. In order to prevent the grim bear soldiers stationed on the front line from being too boring, Shi Xiong had the idea of moving one and the other, and once again shamelessly moved the playing cards of later generations and the national quintessence mahjong of China. Because of poker and mahjong, and it's okay to dig an ice hole on the big lake to catch fish, and go hunting in the dense forest outside, this winter suddenly seems to be less boring. Through the radio, Stone Bear knows about the Salt Sweet, Marie-Detroit-Cleveland line of defense every day, but it's just a bit hard for the Grimace soldiers who are doing relays. Because Jetty Roy has not developed a more powerful radio station, the maximum effective transmission distance of the radio station used by the Grim Bear Army is only 200 kilometers. Although the radio wave can travel far, it can be used with as the distance increases. Most of the radio waves are eventually received and become useless. Garbled. After testing, 200 kilometers is the current limit for effective radio transmission. Therefore, in order to ensure long-distance communication, a relay station must be added in the middle. This kind of relay station is an artificial relay station composed of a squad of about 10 soldiers. On the route of the Grim Bear Army, such a squad would be dropped every about 180 kilometers. Then these 10 people would build houses and defensive positions in the local area, and at the same time set up antennas to receive and transmit radio waves. These fighters have personnel who specialize in receiving and transmitting radios. Generally speaking, the fighters at the relay station are divided into 3 groups, with 2 people in each group, and they are on duty in turns. One of them is responsible for shaking the hand-cranked generator at regular intervals to power the radio station. The other person is responsible for receiving the signal. Once the signal is received, it will immediately be converted into text through the Morse code, and then the text will be converted into the Morse code for transmission, and finally the number of its own relay station will be added. There is no other way. Before the development of high-power long-distance radio communication equipment, the Grim Bear Army in the Cherokee could only communicate in this way. But even so, this communication method is currently the most advanced in the world. Because there is no table yet, each relay station is equipped with a large number of long incense. This kind of long incense with a length of 60 centimeters will take about half an hour to burn each incense stick. After burning 2 incense sticks, a generator and radio will be activated. The entire Grim Bear Army and the communications between Shangjin and other gathering places are relayed in this way. As for the other 4 people, in addition to the squad leader, they will also be divided into 3 groups, with 1 person in each group, responsible for guarding tasks. The squad leader is responsible for leading the entire team. Although there are not many soldiers in this squad, the weapons they are equipped with are very good. One such relay station would be equipped with 255 mortars and 5 grenades, and each soldier would be equipped with a bear rifle, 5 grenades and other corresponding ammunition. Once a large-scale enemy attacked the relay station, 55 mortars would be used in the distance. After the enemy rushed into the range of the grenadier, it was bombed with the grenadier, and finally hit with a rifle and grenades. Although the soldiers at the relay station were equipped with weapons and ammunition according to this concept, in fact, 55 mortars were rarely used. This thing is more of a comforting effect. Of course, if the enemy is really unstoppable, then these fighters will run away. These warriors are selected warriors. Each warrior has excellent riding skills, so each warrior is equipped with a horse. Therefore, once the situation is really unstoppable, they will not wait to die stupidly. However, this kind of sneak attack has never happened before. One is that these relay stations are mostly placed behind the main force of the Grim Bear army, and the other relay stations are not large in scale. And usually the relay stations are selected at high altitude such as the top of the mountain construction, so it is not so easy to find a small relay station. When I was in the south before, the soldiers at the relay station could say anything, but this time they came to the north. If it weren't for Stone Bear to tell them how to build the ground and how to keep warm, the soldiers at these relay stations would be really tough. But even so, this winter has brought misfortune to the soldiers who did not have a poorly prepared relay station. Fortunately, the distance between each relay station is only about 180 kilometers, and the relay stations are mostly built along navigable rivers, so the supply of the relay stations is still no problem. Even if the rivers in the north were frozen, the supply would have been replenished long ago. However, Shi Xiong was still worried about the soldiers at these relay stations. Therefore, when the weather appeared to be sunny for 5 or 6 consecutive days, Shi Xiong decided to lead a group of soldiers along the route built by the relay station. In this way, we can not only show condolences to the soldiers at the relay station, but also send them some supplies. Finally, after Shi Xiong intends to console these soldiers, he will go to the front line to visit the Grim Bear soldiers who are standing on the front line. Shi Xiong is a person who just walks away, so early that morning, the snow sledge convoy pulled by hundreds of dogs and hundreds of reindeer set off. This year is not like later generations. At this time, the living area of the caribou will extend a lot to the south. At least there are many caribou in the Great Lakes region. These reindeer are all part of the collection of the Grim Bear Army Westward Army after they defeated the Chippewa, who tamed reindeer long ago. Dog sledges are loaded with supplies, and snow sledges pulled by reindeer are seated with people. www.wuxiaspot.com. In this kind of weather, snow sledges are the most suitable means of transportation. The facts have also proved that Shi Xiong's choice is very correct. In the beginning, part of the guards had to follow their bosses, because as the guards, their main responsibility was to defend their chiefs and many high-level tribes. They are so resolute that Shi Xiong has nothing to do, although these loyal men will be resolutely ordered to execute it, but that will break their hearts after all, so Shi Xiong decided to let them taste the cold, the horror of the zone, let them taste the power of nature. So, the 1,000 guards were properly packed, fully armed, and done all the protection they could do. They set off with their boss in the envy of the guards and generals who hadn't been selected. But they didn't even arrive for a long time when they set off, so they went back to the camp one by one with their heads down. Why? Because they haven't even gone out for 10 miles. The snow that is close to 1 meter thick is simply not something that a war horse can subdue. This war horse has long legs and height, but they don't have the wide hooves of reindeer that are suitable for walking on ice and snow. Therefore, when these war horses go down with one hoof, the snow will reach the horse's belly. In this case, let alone these horses running with people on their backs, people want to have to walk with their horses. How can I move forward? So, after tasting the terrifying power of nature, these soldiers of the guards can only return to the camp obediently. P.S. Bowen thank 18,665,364,504 for your reward. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 540. Arduous Trek. Shi Xiong and his party did not return along the same way they came, but moved eastward along the south bank of Lake Superior. After all, the surrounding area of Lake Superior is the home of the Chippewa people. When the Chippewa people were suppressed in the Qing dynasty, the 1st Division and most of the guards marched from west to east along the shore of the lake. Therefore, these zeros and zeros, the Chippewa tribes scattered along the shores of Lake Superior, have become supply points one after another for the Grim Bears on their way forward. There is a way to go between the tribes of these Chippewa people, although the original road was buried by the heavy snow. Under the leadership of Chippewa guides who are familiar with the local situation, Shi Xiong and the others did not go wrong. From the western end of Lake Superior, the former king's court of the Chippewa, to the eastern end of Sault Ste. Marie, the straight line distance is more than 600 kilometers. Because Shi Xiong and the others walked along the shore of the lake, even if they walked at a suitable location or even on the frozen lake, the actual distance they walked far exceeded the figure of 600 kilometers. For such a long route, it takes at least half a month to walk even in summer. It is now the coldest time of the year, and the road is blocked by heavy snow. Even if there are dogs pulling sledges and reindeer, it also took Shi Xiong more than 40 days. Fortunately, Shi Xiong and the more than 100 people have enough supplies, and there are enough prey in the jungle and the big lake, so that they will not be hungry. But when Shi Xiong and his group arrived at Sault Ste. Marie at the east end of the Great Lake, all of them lost weight. There were 4 relay stations along the way. Shi Xiong was pleased that although the soldiers at these relay stations lived very lonely and bored, but their small days were pretty good, except for their mental outlook. They were also weak in other aspects of the body. Not bad. Of course, along the way, Shi Xiong has also instilled all kinds of spiritual chicken soup for the fighters at these relay stations. Sure enough, they praised each of these lads as not drinking chicken soup, but more like fighting chicken blood. The Son of God, the great prophet, and the greatest chief in the history of the tribe personally came to care and condolences. How can this not make these warriors excited? You must know that they joined the Grim Bear army for the purpose of working hard for their boss. Now the legendary boss is here, and he personally gave them all kinds of supplies, and even taught them to play poker and mahjong. Such a boss is definitely worthy of death. In fact, in addition to the soldiers at the 4 relay stations along the way, Shi Xiong also visited and sympathized with the soldiers who stood by on the road. These strongholds are all inhabited. They used to be Chippewa tribes. Later, after the Grim Bear army conquered these tribes, they gathered and disrupted the tribes and sent them to the south by various methods. A large number of tribes have been brought from the south to fill these tribes, so there are many tribes living in these tribes and the strongholds of the Grim Bear army. Because of the large number of people, the grizzly soldiers stationed in these strongholds did not have a hard time. The integration of the previous 4 years has now played a huge role. The Indians of other tribes that have been integrated into the tribe are now able to cooperate well with the Grim Bear soldiers. These tribesmen have excellent hunting skills, and the Grim Bear army soldiers have advanced weapons, so even if it is cold here, they can find enough food for their stomachs. Although it is still difficult, the clansmen in these strongholds and the Grim Bear soldiers have a very good mental outlook. Because they all know that once the spring season comes, they can grow a lot of food on this fertile land, and when the winter comes next year, it will not be in such a difficult state anymore. It will become heaven. Along the way, the scattered strongholds are like a string of pearls, lined up along the south bank of the Great Lake. Stone Bear knows that these strongholds will undergo tremendous changes with the retiring of time. By then, it will become one of the best areas for the tribe in the empire. Later generations of America, the Great Lakes region is one of the best areas in America. Shi Xiong is also confident to build this place into a better area. When the time was approaching March, the cold wind blowing from the north was no longer so icy. The Stone Bear and his party finally went through a difficult trek. After a journey of more than 800 kilometers, they arrived at the later generation of Sault Ste. Marie. which is where Lake Superior and Lake Huron meet. The division headquarters of the 1st Division of the Grim Bear Army is stationed here, Kuwama, and most of the senior officers of the 1st Division are concentrated here. This is also the most prosperous place for the Chippewa people except the royal court. After all, the Chippewa people rose from this area, and hundreds of years ago, this place has always been the seat of the Chippewa people's royal court. Last year, when the Grim Bear Army took the Chippewas' royal court in a blitzkrieg, the 1st Division and 3,000 guards under the leadership of Kuwama divided into 2 troops and continued to attack east along the north and south banks of the Great Lakes, and finally merged from Sault Ste. Marie at the eastern end of the Great Lake before the arrival of winter. Later, in order to prevent the Hurons and Iroquois from sneaking attacks, the 1st Division, together with other Grimace soldiers who defeated the Ottawa and Miami, built the Sault Ste. Marie-Detroit-Cleveland line of defense. On this long line of defense that is more than 600 kilometers in length, a total of 40 Blizzard regiments with a total of 40,000 people are stationed here. This line of defense is not only a line of defense, but also a forward base for attacking the Huron and Iroquois next year. Shi Xiong and his party finally reached the northernmost point of this line of defense. Here, Lake Superior and Lake Huron are connected by a wide natural waterway. Of course, the Sault Ste. Marie Canal has not been built here, and there is no lock to allow boats to pass through this waterway smoothly and between the 2 large lakes. At this time, the conditions of this natural waterway are still relatively bad. After all, there is a drop of more than 6 meters between Lake Superior and Lake Huron. The huge amount of water between the 2 lakes makes the water flow in this waterway very turbulent. But now, this waterway has been sealed by a layer of ice that is more than half a meter thick, and people can freely travel between the 2 banks of the river through the ice. Of course, looking east from the top of the highest hill here, you can also see Manitoulin Island, the world's largest lake island in Lake Huron, more than 100 kilometers away. The Stone Bear and his party have gone through an arduous trek, and they have completed the distance of more than 800 kilometers in the coldest season. This is certainly a remarkable feat, but the arrival of the Stone Bear has also benefited the Grim Bear soldiers stationed here. They brought endless enthusiasm and confidence. Of course, walking along the way also made Shi Xiong aware of the importance of traffic. Now the construction of a concrete road from Shangjing to Monongahela in the south has begun, and the road from Shangjing to important gathering places and several other directions has also entered the construction plan. Now, Shi Xiong has a plan to build a northern highway. Chapter 541, Huron Messenger. The presence of the chief made the officers and men of the 1st Division happily. They have always been the chief's most iron supporters, and even claim to be even harder than the guards. After all, before the formation of the guards, every time the Grizzlies marched out, the highest commander of the 1st Division must be the chief. And even in the guards, 60% of them were selected from the 1st Division. The title of the main force of the 1st Division was not blown out, it was actually achieved with victories one after another. Now, the first stop of the chief's inspection was again at the 1st Division, which naturally made many soldiers overjoyed. In the evening, a grand bonfire dinner was held at the headquarters of the 1st Division. Not only the soldiers of the 1st Division and the guards, but also many senior leaders of the Chippewa and some tribesmen participated in this grand bonfire dinner. Although this is no longer the seat of the Chippewa people, it is the birthplace of the Chippewa people. So it is still very important here, and a large number of Chippewa people live here. Originally, these Chippewas thought that after they were defeated by the Cherokees, they would need to migrate in the cold winter. After all, the defeated side needed to give up the territory. This is a popular way for the North American Indian tribes for thousands of years. Everyone knows that long-distance migration in this kind of weather is completely looking for death. So these Chippewa people were frightened at first. What makes them ecstatic is that these Cherokees did not drive them away, but let them continue to live here, and in many ways also helped these Chippewas. Comparing heart to heart, although the Chippewas were very dissatisfied that the Cherokee defeated them, they had to be grateful for the help of these Grim Bear soldiers. especially the technology of ground sculpting, stove, canning and firewall. Let these native Chippewa people feel the warmth they have never felt in the harsh winter. The soldiers of the 1st Division stationed in the local area took out part of the military rations from time to time to relieve the Chippewa people who had no food, so that these Chippewa people could eat delicious fried noodles, pork floss, big white steamed buns, rice, and stir-fried vegetables. Waiting for food has increased the favor of these Chippewa people. One winter is going to pass. Not only did the 1st Division and the Guards not have any conflicts with the locals, but because they often helped these Chippewas, it became harmonious here. Now the Cherokee War is here. Anyway, these Chippewa people need to come to express their gratitude to this war. After all, in this winter's exchanges, these Chippewas had figured out that this disciplined Cherokee troop was the troop most valued by the legendary chieftain of the Son of God. And when the Stone Bear showed up at the bonfire dinner with Tep, the soldiers of the Grim Bear Army screamed for joy, and those Chippewa people were dumbfounded. Such a majestic character is something they had never even thought of before. The most important thing is that beside this majestic chief, there is a fierce giant bear that makes his legs tremble involuntarily. Such a huge giant bear, even these native Chippewa people have never seen it before. And this looking fierce giant bear obediently lay on the side of the chief of the Son of God, docile as a dirt dog. Perhaps, only the children of the gods can make a fierce giant bear so well behaved. Only such a person like a can be worthy of everyone's worship. This is almost a common idea in the hearts of all Chippewa people who saw Stone Bear and Tepi. Shi Xiong did not expect that he just showed up with Tep, and immediately won the admiration and even worship of the Chippewa people. The cold winter night cannot dissipate the fiery enthusiasm of the soldiers, and the large bonfires burning in this cold winter night are particularly hot. The frozen Lake Huron and Lake Superior in the distance are still white, and bright light bulb-like stars are all over the sky. A colorful Milky Way is hanging from the sky, as if decorating this grand bonfire dinner. Large chunks of venison, beef, lamb and even wolf meat have been brought up, and large fish larger than human have been brought up. The prey caught by the soldiers of the Blizzard Army during the day have been moved up. They will become delicious food in the raging campfire. Datong's liquor was also brought up, because it had been determined to spend the winter on the Great Lakes, so when the river was not frozen, a large amount of liquor was transported from Xiangjing. Many soldiers who can make wine in the Grim Bear Army will also make some high-level liquor temporarily. After all, here, liquor is the best thing to keep out the cold. No one can refuse to take a sip in cold weather. Soon, the smell of wine was mixed with meat, and the flat square was enveloped. Some of the excited Grim Bear soldiers and even the local Chippewa people began to dance around the bonfire in excitement, and beside these dancers, there are a large number of people clapping, singing, or percussing various instruments to cheer and accompany these dancers. The scene is so lively. The stone bear sits on a seat covered with bear skin in the center. www.wuxiaspot.com. Looking at this harmonious scene cheerfully, he is also overjoyed in his heart. What if all the tribes could be like these Chippewas? The wine was half-hearted, and the Kuima, who drove around the stone bear with the wine jar, accompanied the stone bear back to the original seat. Kuima made a gesture to some of the guards around him, and more than 20 guards with big waists immediately separated everyone around him. "Why, something to say?" Shi Xiong asked his good brother with a smile. Seeing the guards isolate the unrelated personnel, Shi Xiong knew that Kuima had something to tell himself. "Yes, boss, I want to tell you something." After a pause, Hurry Up looked up at the cheerful people around, then lowered his head and said in a low voice, "About 3 days ago, I saw it. The messenger sent by the Hurons. That guy is the leader of a very powerful tribe among the Hurons, and he is also the brother of the current chief of the Hurons." "Huh?" Shi Xiong made a nasal sound playfully. "The Huron people are asking for peace, or are they going to surrender?" "Boss, your judgment is really good. The Huron people came this time to seek peace. I wanted to radio you about this matter, but when I received the news that you will be here in 3 days, we are ready to discuss this matter carefully when you arrive." Shi Xiong nodded, Is the Huron messenger still there? I have been waiting in the division department. Well, I will meet this messenger in person tomorrow. Chapter 542, Turn your face. When you say turn your face. The envoy sent by the Hurons was Zerib, the leader of the Elk tribe, the second largest tribe of the Huron tribe. Well, this guy also has an identity, that is, the brother of the Huron chief Balzaca. If it were in ancient China, this guy would be a prince. Zeribu is a tall and burly guy. If it weren't for the fancy design on his face and the tall hairstyle that resembles a wild boar head, Shi Xiong really thinks this guy is a standard Mongolian man. In fact, this hairstyle of the Huron is a bit similar to that of the Mohican who has been exterminated. The difference is that the dry head of the Mohican is only a straight hair in the middle, while the hairstyle of the Huron is puffy. Yes, it looks like a wild boar at first glance. No wonder those French people who first came into contact with the Hurons thought that the Huron's hairstyle is no different from a wild boar. Dear Chief, the Son of God, I am honored to be personally received by you. I am Zerib, the leader of the Huron Elk tribe, and an envoy sent by the great chief Barzaka. As soon as they met, Zeribu put on a low posture respectfully. Even if Shi Xiong had received some of his information from Kuwama's mouth, the leader of Zeribu still did it very humbly. Self-introduction. I know you, Chief Zeribu. Come, let's sit down and say, you don't have to be so respectful in front of me, Shi Xiong said casually and kindly, but when he saw Zeribu's hands crossed and stroking his chest, he saluted. Shi Xiong couldn't help but move in his posture. This way of saluting is no different from that of the Cherokee tribe. Obviously, there must be some origin between the two tribes. In previous lives, Shi Xiong also read some information about the relationship between the Hurons and the Iroquois. All the materials say that the Huron and Iroquois should belong to the same origin. Long ago, these two tribes should belong to the same tribe. The Iroquois lived in the eastern half of Lake Ontario, while the Hurons used to live on the shores of the St. Lawrence River, closely connected between the two. It's just that I don't know why. In the middle of the 17th century, the Iroquois attacked the Hurons. They drove the Hurons westward from the St. Lawrence River where they lived for generations to the north of Lake Huron. This tribe has become an mortal enemy. The Cherokee and the Iroquois are also of the same origin. The language acquired by the Cherokee is Iroquois, although the Hurons speak Hawaiian. This language is also Iroquois, the branch of the language. In addition, the salute posture of the Huron is almost exactly the same as that of the Cherokee. What does this mean? Quite simply, the Hurons are very likely to be the same as the Cherokees long ago, and they are homologous to the Iroquois. In fact, it is said that the Indian tribes living in the northeastern part of the United States have deep ties with the Iroquois. It's just that Stone Bear can't figure out what the Iroquois thinks. With so many powerful tribes, they don't want to woo them. Instead they want to drive out. As a result, what the Hurons, the Erie, and the Cherokees were made. All people have left this tribe. Even the Cherokee who had been driven away by the Iroquois are now killed again, and with almost 10% certainty that the Iroquois will be killed. Could this be the legendary good and evil will eventually be rewarded? The way of heaven is reincarnation. If you don't believe it, look up, who is forgiven by the sky? Is it really that the Iroquois did it too hard, and then God can't stand it anymore and kicked himself up to this age to help those Indian tribes who had been driven away by the Iroquois take revenge on the Iroquois? Thinking of this, Shi Xiong couldn't help but smiled bitterly and stroked his nose. Honorable chieftain, son of God, you are. Zerib was also uneasy. As the leader of the second largest tribe of the entire Huron tribe, and one of the most valuable warriors of the entire Huron tribe, Zeribu has his own pride. But today when he saw the Stone Bear with his own eyes, his pride was immediately knocked to pieces. What is a warrior? What is a warrior? Previously, Zerib thought that people like himself can be called true warriors and warriors, but when he saw the Stone Bear, he realized how naive and ridiculous what he had thought before. This is the real warrior. Especially with the invincible achievements of this great chief who has the title of Son of God, who can be more brave in this world than the one in front of him? It's just this Warkif who looks extremely mighty. Why did he suddenly show such a look? Could it be that he has other ideas? Zareb, of course, didn't know that the Warkif in front of him was distracted just now because of a problem with the salute posture and hairstyle. Shi Xiong smiled, waved his hand and said, "It's okay, but I suddenly remembered something." "Come on, Chief Zarebu, please sit down and taste the tea grown by our Cherokee people." "I think the taste of these tea leaves, it tastes better than the tea that Wasik brought over." There is almost no difficulty in communicating with the leader of Zareb, although the language of the Huron is a bit different from that of the Cherokee. www.wuxiaspad.com. It is really not bad. From this point of view it seems that there is nothing wrong with the argument that both the Hurons and Cherokees are derived from the Iroquois. In other words, the two tribes actually belonged to the same family hundreds of years ago. Seeing that Shi Xiong didn't look evil, Zilubu relaxed a little and sat on his seat. "Chief Zareb, I heard my brother Kuima say that you are here this time with the kindness of your Huron tribe and Chief Barzaka?" After sitting down, Shi Xiong asked himself directly, "The problem?" "Yes, dear chief, the Son of God, I came this time with kindness. Our great Chief Barzaka of the Huron wants to reach a reconciliation with you, chief. The Son of God." "Reconciliation?" Shi Xiong waved his hand to interrupt Zarebu's words. "Chief Zarebu, did you and Chief Barzaka make a mistake? We are here this time, not with the idea of reconciliation. Here, tens of thousands of soldiers of our Blizzard Army have been suffering a long winter in this ice and snow. They have been suffocated. Now my soldiers are waiting for the spring to conquer you and Yeowo. Where's the queer reconciliation? We never thought about this. Even if I agree, my soldiers will not agree." As soon as said these words, Lieb was dumbfounded. There is something wrong with this scene. Shouldn't the two sides be in a peaceful negotiation? Shouldn't the chief of the Son of accept the settlement happily after hearing the news of the settlement? But what is the situation right now? What does he say? Turn his face and turn his face. Chapter 543, Tell. Zareb is obviously not a good messenger. Well, maybe his brother, the Huron chief, wanted to let the mighty Zareb come here to frighten the Cherokee. Anyway, the basic qualities that a messenger should have are basically invisible to this guy. At least the most basic quality is called being not surprised at every change, but Zilubu is obviously far from it. Looking at Zarebu's dazed expression, Shi Xiong knew that this guy should be thinking about it, so he smiled and continued waving his hand. "Chief Zarebu, I think you might have misunderstood what I said." "Misunderstanding? Don't you come here just to defeat us and kill our people? It's like the Iroquois did," Zareb asked a little excitedly. This excitement is obviously more anger. "No, Leader Zareb, we Cherokee started this war with the goal of conquering all the tribes living in the north, including of course your Hurons. But this kind of conquest does not mean killing. At least it's the kind of slaughter that rushes to death." Ishikame's words made Zilubu even more puzzled. Isn't the process of conquering all accompanied by a large number of killings? That's your idea, but for me, conquering does not mean killing, although killing is the best way to conquer. I don't want to use this method to conquer a tribe. Stone Bear continued to slowly say. Our Cherokee tribe rises in the south-central Appalachian Mountains. When I was just a sacrificial guardian in a tribe, I created an expedition team. The purpose of creating this expedition team was to give me my favorite woman takes revenge. Then, my expedition team of only 100 people climbed over the tall Blue Washan Mountain and reached the territory of Uchiran. Zilubu was still a little dazed. Obviously, he didn't know the Yuchi tribe, nor did he know the feats of the expedition team. I led my expedition team to kill many Yuchi people, including the 2 chiefs of this tribe. They all died in my hands. However, it was not to conquer, but to avenge. So I let go. Killed? You killed 2 chiefs of a tribe with only 100 people? Zilubu asked in disbelief. Shi Xiong smiled and nodded, while Kuima said, yes, I saw our chief shoot the second chief Uchiran with my own eyes. His tone was full of pride. There was a look of horror in Zilubu's eyes. Although he does not know how many Yuchi people are, what is certain is that a tribe must have at least several thousand people. and the chief of a tribe has always been the most protected person, and this person in front of him relies on a small number of people. 100 people can kill 2 chiefs of this tribe, and this combat power is too terrifying. The expedition team is the predecessor of the Grim Bear Army, and it is the most primitive predecessor. Shi Xiong's tone also contains a trace of memory and pride. Later, the Creek people approached our chief to take me back, because the Yuchi are a tribe of the Creek people. I killed the 2 chiefs of this tribe. The Creek people as the upper ones will naturally not do it, so they want to take me back by threatening our chiefs. But it's a pity that I had already formed an expeditionary force of about 2,000 people at that time, because I also wanted to kill the Creek people. 2,000 people? 2,000 people want to kill the Creek people with a population of over 100,000, Zareb exclaimed again. Well, it can't be said to be killed, but to be conquered, because in my eyes, except for Yuchi and Chikasha, everyone else is regarded as my compatriot. Even if it is Chikasha, I also let go. A lot has passed. Although the Creek people are strong, I am still ready to conquer them. Then Zarebu was completely attracted by Shi Xiong's story, and he asked involuntarily, "Have you killed a lot of Creek people?" "Yes." The 2,000 expeditionary soldiers led by me met an army of more than 20,000 people from the Creek. They wanted to swallow us in one bite, but we killed thousands of people, and we had no casualties. So the Creek army collapsed. Our expeditionary army took advantage of the captain to drive in, and finally successfully conquered the Creek. Shi Xiong nodded silently. But in that battle, I didn't want to kill too much, but the Creek fighters didn't think they could not beat us, so they took the initiative to get in front of the guns of the expeditionary army. So a killing that shouldn't have happened. That battle was also the expeditionary army and even later, the most slaughter of the Grim Bear army. But that killing also made the expeditionary army famous and frightened, and then we conquered them. Seeing that Zareb still wanted to speak, Shi Xiong waved his hand to stop him, and then said, "Later, the expeditionary army expanded to become the Grim Bear army. We took more advanced weapons to conquer the Pointons. The Pointons did not dare to fight with us and succumbed directly. Then the Grim Bears marched westward to the Chikashas, because the Chikashas and our Cherokees are enemies for generations. In that war, we killed many Chikas who were unwilling to surrender." Shakespeare. This is also the tribe that has killed the most people since the establishment of the Grim Bear army. Later, we crossed the river and continued to attack west. The Osages, Kiowas, and Arapajos were all terrified by our weapons. They chose to surrender. The Comanche of the Great Southwest had no choice. After surrendering, we had to kill some Comanche fighters. www.wuxiaspot.com and broke the Comanche. Even their new chiefs left their people and fled. Then, the Pueblo took the initiative to surrender, and I gave them a good treatment. The Apaches moved west because they were afraid of us and did not want to surrender. As for the Navajo, they were dying. After a few people, I also chose to surrender. Later, the Seven Color Flame Alliance and the Cheyenne people thought they were brave, but they were beaten to the ground by the soldiers, and they finally surrendered. The Crow people were scared to go further northwest. The place ran away. In this way, we conquered the area south of the Great Lakes. That area is hundreds of times the size of the Great Lakes area. Shi Xiong said that although it is simple, but Zalabu listened to it relaxed and happy, but he didn't seem to forget his identity as a messenger. After a while, he asked, "Great Chief, the Son of God, why did you tell me these things?" "It's very simple. I'm just explaining some facts that have happened. And what I want to tell you is that when I conquered such a large piece of land, there were not many people killed, and those who survived are now very well integrated into our Cherokee clan. Last year, I launched the Northern Expedition. The purpose is to conquer you and merge you in, because I want to create an empire composed entirely of our compatriots, a real empire, an empire that can put those Vasikas under your feet. And you are one of the goals of our Northern Expedition. Therefore, you are not eligible for peace talks. You have only two choices like the Creeks. The soldiers surrendered to us after the crash, or surrendered directly and unconditionally like the Pueblo." Chapter 544, Because we are one family. Zalib was silent. He couldn't help but be silent. The words that the chief of the Son of God had just said shocked him too much, and Zarabu could clearly feel that there was nothing false in the words the chief of the Son of God said just now, especially the last sentence. Seeing Zarabu's uncertain face, Shi Xiong sighed slightly and said, "Chief Zarabu, in fact, you are not more entangled than whether your unconditional surrender has lost face compared to the lives of the tribesmen. In other words, a little bit of face shouldn't be a big deal, right? And, if you really can surrender, I promise your people can get the best treatment." Zarab looked at the stone bear in disbelief. Obviously, in his cognition, or in the battle with the Iroquois in his life, preferential treatment of prisoners should never have happened. As the deadly enemies of generations, small-scale battles often broke out between the Hurons and the Iroquois. The two sides also have victories, but in any case, the losing party has almost no second way to go besides losing his life. Shi Xiong could clearly feel Zarabu's disbelief. He smiled slightly and said, "Leader Zarabu, if you don't believe me, you can go outside to see the Chippewa people. You are not in a hurry anyway. Go back, then you might as well take this opportunity to go around here more. You can see how we treat the Chippewa people." Ishikama stood up. "Leader Zarabu, I still have something to deal with, so let's end the conversation between us." While talking, Shi Xiong walked outside, and when he was about to reach the door, Zalab suddenly asked, "Respected chief, the Son of God, can you answer me a question?" Shi Xiong stopped, but did not turn his head, and said in a deep voice, "You said it." Zalabu hesitated behind him, as if he was thinking about what to say. "Dear Chief, Son of God, I would like to ask, why did you tell me those things today? Or why did you explain to me in such detail, before, whether you were from Chippewa or Miami, or it's from Ottawa? It seems that they have never done anything like this. And as far as I know, when your army attacked the Ottawas last year, they seem to have sent envoys." Shi Xiong turned around this time, looked at Zarab with a puzzled look, and said in a thoughtful tone, "Because you Hurons are different to me from Chippewa, Ottawa, and Miami." The doubts on Libu's face became more intense. Shi Xiong thought for a while and decided to explain. He said to Quema, "You make one of our tribe's oldest salute methods." Hurry up for a moment, then crossed his hands to stroke his chest, and bowed slightly to the stone bear. "Chief Zalab, do you see anything coming?" Zarabu's eyes lit up, as if he had come up with something. He hesitated to ask, "Respected Chief, Son of God, how does your tribe's salute method be the same as our tribe's salute method?" And the salute method is the same as that of the Iroquois." "That's right." Shi Xiong nodded. "We Cherokee, your Hurons and Iroquois have the same salute methods. Moreover, Chief Zarab, I'm afraid you have not paid attention. The conversation between just now did not use an interpreter, but the communication between us is still very smooth. Haven't you come up with anything?" Translator is the Cherokee's term for translation. Obviously, the leader of Zarab also knows the meaning of this name. "Huh?" Zarab seemed to have thought of something, and exclaimed in a low voice. Shi Xiong slowly walked up to him and said solemnly, "Look, our two tribes are separated by thousands of mountains and rivers. Originally, it was impossible to have the same salute method, and it was impossible to speak almost the same language. But this kind of thing happened to us. Don't you think why this happened?" "Honor Chief, Son of God, do you mean?" There was an incredible expression on Zarab's face. "Yes, you should know that I have been personally directed by the Supreme Sun God, so I know many things. In fact, whether it is our Cherokee or you Huron, we are actually from Iloa, a tribe separated from the Quebec. But the Supreme Sun did not tell me why the Hurons turned their faces with the Iroquois and became feuds, nor did he tell me why the Cherokees were driven by the Iroquois out of the Great Lakes area. But it is undeniable that our two tribes were indeed a family long ago. Although we are separated by thousands of mountains and rivers, the same blood flows in our bodies. Do you understand?" Zalabu was dumbfounded. He seemed to be unable to accept this result. But he had to accept it. Shi Xiong patted Zarab's shoulder. "That's why I personally say those things to you, and why I treat you differently from the Chippewas and Ottawas. These are words, I hope you after being able to go back,
Tell the truth with Chief Balzaca. I think Chief Balzaca will make the wisest choice. www.wuxiasput.com. After a pause, Shi Xiong said firmly, in fact, this time the main purpose of the northern expedition with the soldiers of the Grim Bear Army was to conquer the Iroquois, because we Cherokee are very eager to return to our ancestral land to see with our own eyes, regardless of whether it is you, Chippewa or Ottawa. It's just that you have been extra piggybacked in the process. Therefore, I really don't want to cause bloodshed because of your resistance. I hope you can accept what I just said, unconditionally surrender, and I will promise to give you the best treatment, said. Shi Xiong walked out the door without turning his head. Only Kuema and Zilibu were left in the house. Kuema looked at Zilibu, who was a little at a loss, and sighed in his heart. Shi Xiong's words just now had a great impact on Kuema, and he did not expect that the tribe represented by this guy in front of him would be a family with his tribe long ago. Kuema didn't know why, but he believed Shi Xiong's words so much, so he had no doubts. Took out a box of cigarettes from his pocket, and quickly pulled out one and handed it to Zilibu. Come on, try the cigarette invented by our boss himself. I promise you will like it. Lighting a cigarette for Zilibu, Kuema said sincerely, Zilibu, you have heard what our boss said. I think you should really accept what our boss said just now, because it is for you and for you, the best way for the tribe. Also, take a good rest tonight, and tomorrow I will take you here for a good look. I hope that when you go back, you will faithfully see everything you see here. Tell your chief, and your chief will make the wisest choice. Chapter 545, Critical Area. Zilibu, accompanied by Kuema, wandered around the division headquarters of the 1st Division for 5 days. During this period, he not only saw the lives of the Chippewa people living here, but also enjoyed a military exercise for free. The idea of military exercises was put forward quickly. Although the Hurons surrender or not surrender is nothing to the Grizzlies, but if a maneuver can be used to deter the Hurons, and at the same time, the Hurons can be taken down without blood, try not to cause casualties, this is undoubtedly a very cost-effective thing. So, when Zilibu and his subordinates saw the hot air balloon that could fly in the sky, and saw the earth-shaking 76mm cannon salvos, they were already tough enough without scaring urine. In the end, Zilibu hurried away with his men. Even if it started another round of snowfall, they were like frightened rabbits, regardless of Kuema's retention, and plunged their heads into the ice and snow. Fortunately, the location of the 1st Division is not too far away from the Hurons' royal court. It is only more than 300 kilometers away. Moreover, Zilibu and the others came here on a sledge pulled by reindeer, and they were very prepared. Sufficient, so Shi Xiong didn't worry about them being blocked by the blizzard in the middle of the road. Zilibu, as a native of the Great Lakes region, has a wealth of experience in dealing with severe cold. Coupled with what they learned from the 1st Division on how to build ground stubble and even the method of building snow houses, they are enough to ensure that they will not die halfway. After the heavy snowfall, Shi Xiong continued to lead his men and began to march south. The line of defense from Sault Ste. Marie via Detroit to Cleveland is more than 600 kilometers long. The 40 regiments of more than 40,000 Blizzard soldiers are stationed on this line. As the chief, the Stone Bear must go circle. Starting from the 1st Division, which is the later Sault Ste. Marie, walked less than 100 kilometers south to reach the Mackinac waterway between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. Of course, this waterway is not called Mackinac Waterway at this time, but in order to make these key locations easier to remember, Shi Xiong did not hesitate to move the names of later generations over and install them on these key locations. Actually, Stone Bear did this kind of thing a long time ago. For example, the Memphis fortress was attacked before. The fortress didn't originally have this name, but he forced Stone Bear to change its name to the Memphis Fortress. There is also the area where the 1st Division is stationed, and it is also the birthplace of the Chippewa people, so it was crowned Sault Ste. Marie by the Stone Bear. As a waterway connecting Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, it is also the dividing line between the two Great Lakes recognized by later generations. The importance of the Mackinac Waterway is beyond doubt. Therefore, Shi Xiong moved the name of Mackinac in later generations. In later generations, a Mackinac bridge over 8 kilometers in length was built on the 6-kilometer wide Mackinac Waterway. The bridge was also designated as the boundary between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. Interstate 75 is on this bridge. Go up through. This waterway will inevitably become a battleground for military strategists in the future, although now because of the existence of Niagara Falls, people can only enter Lake Ontario through the St. Lawrence River, and cannot enter the other 4 lakes. But in the original historical time and space, with the construction of the Erie Canal, humans can directly go from the Atlantic Ocean, entering into the other 4 Great Lakes. The waterways connecting the 4 Great Lakes will inevitably become a battleground for military strategists. Later, when the Chicago Canal was repaired, it was possible to directly connect the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River, and these connecting waterways became more important. During the Northern Expedition, the supplies transported from Shangjing to the north, especially the supplies to the 1st Division and the guards, were transferred from Shangjing to the Illinois River via the Mississippi River and then to the Des Plaines River to later Chicago. At this time, although the Chicago Canal connecting the Chicago River and the Des Plaines River had not yet been constructed, the distance from the Des Plaines River to Lake Michigan was only a mere 10 kilometers and less than 20 kilometers, so a lot of supplies were provided to the 1st Division. The materials were shipped again from Chicago through this channel and finally sent to Lake Superior. Whether it is the Erie Canal or the Chicago Canal, the Stone Bear must be built after the empire is established. After all, no one knows the importance of connecting the Mississippi River with the Atlantic Ocean. It is no exaggeration to say that the importance of these 2 canals is even more important than the main roads planned to be built. After passing the Mackinac Channel on the ice, the Stone Bear and his party headed south along the west bank of Lake Huron. This used to be the core area of the Ottawa people, and now it has become the residence of the 7th Mixed Division. Although nominally all the mixed divisions of the Grim Bear Army are composed of fighters from the Cherokee tribe and other tribes, with the continuous expansion of the Grim Bear Army, now except for the Guards and the 1st Division, they are completely pure. In addition to the Cherokee fighters, the other 9 divisions, including the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Divisions as the main force, are all mixed divisions, because these 3 main divisions also have many other tribes. Warrior. During the Northern Expedition, the 1st Division, the 2nd Division, the 3rd Division, the mixed 5th and mixed 6th Divisions, and the Guards were the main forces. Later, they successfully defeated the Chippewa, Ottawa and Miami. After people www.wuxiaspa.com was in the idea of recruiting recruits, the 3rd Division, mixed 5th Division and mixed 6th Division returned to Beijing, while mixed 7th and mixed 8th Divisions became stationed in the Sault Ste. Marie Detroit Cleveland Army line of defense. After crossing the Mackinac Channel, he entered the defense area of the mixed 7th Division. Here, Shi Xiong inspected and expressed condolences to the soldiers of the Grim Bear Army who were stationed on the 200-kilometer-long line of defense, which greatly encouraged the morale of these soldiers. Then, Shi Xiong and his party continued south and entered the area defended by the 2nd Division. The division headquarters of the 2nd Division is stationed near Detroit. The Bighorn Sheep and the 2nd Division's Bone Spear are located here. The defense area of the 2nd Division started from the central part of Lake Huron in the north and extended to the south to the southern shore of Lake Erie, with a length of more than 200 kilometers. This section of the defense zone includes the lower half of Lake Huron, the St. Clair River, the Detroit River, and the entire west bank of Lake Erie. Because the core area of the Iroquois is on the south shore of Lake Ontario, they can reach here in the shortest time whether they walk from the frozen lake or take the road from the later Hamilton-Detroit line. It can be said that this is the most important area of the entire line of defense. And when attacking the Iroquois next year, this path is also the shortest and best. Although it is necessary to cross the St. Clair River and the swift Niagara River, this road is undoubtedly the most convenient road recently. It is precisely for this reason that the 2nd Division, which is second only to the 1st Division in combat effectiveness, is stationed here, and the Bighorn Sheep, as the highest commander of the Grim Bear Army, also sits here. Chapter 546. The British were terrified. How's the situation? The Iroquois are restless. They were all old brothers, and as soon as they met, Shi Xiong asked directly about the situation here. The Bighorn Sheep shrugged his shoulders and made a gesture for Bone Spear to speak. Although the Bighorn is the supreme commander of the Grim Bear Army, he generally does not participate in the following matters. He is now mainly responsible for formulating strategic plans, and he rarely participates in tactical matters. The 10 masters of the violent bear army are the makers and implementers of specific tactics. Like the Salt Sweet, Marie Detroit Cleveland line of defense jointly developed by Stone Bear and Bighorn Sheep, it belongs to the strategic aspect, and the specific defense is a tactical matter. In this regard, the 2nd Division's Long Bone Spear has more say. In general, the Iroquois in winter are relatively safe. In the early winter, the Iroquois sent someone to harass us, but we were bombarded with a 76mm cannon and killed a person. Thousands of Iroquois. Since then, the Iroquois dare not send troops to harass us easily. However, our hot air balloon observers can see small groups of Iroquois moving in the distance every day. It is estimated to be watching us. I didn't move these small groups of Iroquois. These guys run faster than a grassy jumper. As long as we get out, they won't be able to find anyone for a while. Bone Spear's introduction quite simply, it means that nothing big happened here this winter. Shi Xiong nodded and said, I stayed for a few days on Kuwama's side in the north before coming to you. Kuwama and the others have encountered this kind of problem. The Huron was harassing him, and it was in the early winter of last year. At the time, but after several fights, the Hurons were also scared, and they never dared to send anyone to harass them. Before I came here, the Hurons even sent messengers to make peace with us, but I refused up. The Bighorn Sheep frowned and asked, Boss, it's a good thing for the Huron people to take the initiative to talk about it. Why did you refuse? Shi Xiong shook his head and said, I just told them that we are here to conquer all the tribes here. No matter who you are, as long as you stand in our way, you will either obediently and unconditionally surrender, or we broke down and surrendered. As for making peace, we don't have to make peace with them, nor do they have the qualifications to make peace with us. Bone Spear laughed and clapped his hands and said, the boss is so aggressive. Why should those Huron people make peace with us? They really don't have this qualification. The Bighorn Sheep also nodded with a wry smile. Those British people here don't do anything extra to us, right? Shi Xiong asked again. In fact, when this line of defense was established, Stone Bear was most worried about not the Iroquois and Hurons, but the British colonists who occupied Detroit and took over New France. Detroit is not only an important city in the United States in later generations, but also a large city in the United States. Now, Detroit Castle, which is still a military fortress, is still a very important British fortress in the Great Lakes region. As early as in the 17th century, more than 100 years ago, the French discovered that Detroit's generation of Tebby was suitable for settlement. Later, in 1701, French officer Antoine de la Macadie used in the name of the Earl of Pontchâteau, the Secretary of the Navy of Louis XIV. The Fort Pontchâteau on the Detroit River was established here as a fur trading center and an important military fortress in the Great Lakes region. Later in the 7 Years' War, the French lost their ownership of Fort Pontchâteau on the Detroit River, and the military fortress was taken over by the British. The British simplified the name of this fortress to Detroit. The British also sent a large number of soldiers and colonists to station in this fortress. Detroit quickly developed into one of the most important military fortresses in the Great Lakes region. In the beginning, those Vasicus came to protest, including those British soldiers in red clothes and some colonists. They said we threatened their safety, but I blocked them from returning. Bone Spear smiled, said, the Vasicu gang was terrified. But, what do we do? This is our territory, not their British territory. Shi Xiong smiled and gestured to the Bone Spear with a thumb. The Bighorn Sheep smiled and said, after that protest, those Vasicus were quiet for a while, but one day, some drunk Vasicus wanted to forcefully break into our garrison camp. Our soldiers shot past 14 Vasicus in a round of gunfire, and those Vasicus were immediately frightened. Later, the highest officer in the fortress came and asked us why they killed their people. I tell that guy directly, you better take care of your people, otherwise if we anger us, we will grab your fortress directly. It's like we grabbed those French fortresses. Then the guy is scared again. I dare not speak anymore. Ha 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 ha. All three of them laughed. Shi Xiong definitely does not doubt the words of Bone Spear and Bighorn Sheep, because he knows very well that although this place has been regarded as a back garden by the British www.wuxiaspot.com, now suddenly there are a full 10,000 2nd Division soldiers stationed near Detroit. Although the front line opened was relatively long, it also scared the more than 2,000 British garrisons and more colonists in the Detroit fortress. In addition, although the British at this time defeated the French in the 7 Years' War and took over a large number of French sites in North America, in fact, the British are really a little overwhelmed. Now that the British are too late to win over many powerful Indian tribes, how can they dare to offend these powerful Indian tribes? Especially after the gunshot in Lexington, the British have now completely fallen into dire straits. Their military power in North America is not as sufficient as imagined, and the British government's wallet is not as rich as imagined. Facing the War of Independence that broke out in the 13 colonies of North America, the British can't even take care of the uprising colonists. How can they still have the intention to offend the native Indians? If Detroit's position is not too critical and important, maybe Boston, which is tight at this time, will have to transfer all the British troops stationed in Detroit. Besides, the strength of the Cherokee is now known not only by the Indian tribes in the New World of North America, but also by the great powers as far away as the European continent. The Ferguson rifles, which are now widely equipped by the Spanish, French, and British armies, were flowed out of the Cherokee hands. Now that 10,000 powerful Cherokee fighters have come to Detroit, it is strange that the British dare to stab them. Not to mention the aftermath of the Pontiac uprising that broke out more than 10 years ago is not over yet. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 547, The Reason. Speaking of this Pontiac uprising, Shi Xiong had really understood it in his previous life. If the 7 Years' War changed the pattern of European powers in the New World in North America, and the War of Independence resulted in the birth of a powerful country, then the Pontiac uprising that occurred at the end of the 7 Years' War opened up the relationship between the North American Indians and the North American Indians, the prelude to the struggle of European colonists and even the Americans after independence. Everyone knows that before the 7 Years' War, French Louisiana and New France controlled a vast area from New Orleans in the south, the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River Basin in the north, but in terms of the area of the colony, the French controlled the area of the colony. It is much larger than the 13 colonies in North America controlled by the British. Of course, the so-called control of the French is nothing more than a self-satisfaction. After all, the strategy of the French in the North American colonies was completely different from that of the British. The colonization of French colonists in North America emphasized trade rather than land. Everything was dominated by fur trade, and little attention was paid to controlling and occupying land. The British were completely different. The British, especially British colonists, had an extremely greedy attitude towards land. Their colonial strategy in North America was to emphasize land rather than trade. This is also the reason why the French colonized North America earlier than the British, but the strength of the French colonists in North America was far inferior to that of the British colonists. You must know that during the 7 Years' War, the French colonists in North America were only a few tens of thousands. At that time, the number of British colonists in North America had exceeded 1.5 million. Although the main battlefield of the 7 Years' War was in Europe, in the Atlantic Ocean, North America, and India, it was as tragic as a dog's brain. The 7 Years' War that took place in the New World in North America was called the French-Indian War in history. In this war, most of the Indian tribes living on the East Coast were involved in this war. For their own interests, more Indian tribes chose to form alliances with the French, and a few tribes chose the British as their allies. And they went to war against the opponents, and the entire eastern part of North America was united. The 7 Years' War that took place between 1756 and 1763, the final result was that France and its Indian allies were defeated and had to swallow the bitter pill. The British took over many French territories and rule in North America in accordance with the Armistice Agreement. Quan became the new ruler of the French colonies in North America. In this several-year war, the local fur trade in the New World in North America has been hit hard, and the lucrative fur trade in the past has dropped to a freezing point. However, when the British seized control of the Detroit Fortress in 1760, they began to re-establish peaceful relations with many Indian tribes who had sided with the French or were neutral in the war. In an attempt to revive the war that had been blocked, the fur trade tried to enrich the supply of goods that were cut off during the war. Regardless of the Indians' ignorance and backwardness, their interests still make them forget their feuds, especially when the British continued to transport goods such as rum, iron and other relatively cheap goods in Europe to the New World in North America. Immediately after the 7 Years' War ended, it immediately won the goodwill of the local Indian tribes. But again, the British strategy in the North American New World is not based on trade. What they covet is the vast and rich land occupied by the Indians. In particular, the arrogant British regarded Indians as barbarians with no education and need to be disciplined, rather than business partners who could deal with them on an equal footing. These colonial officials looked down on Indians from the bottom of their hearts, so they changed their trade. Traditionally, it no longer respects the culture of the Indians. Instead, it implements a high-pressure policy, setting various restrictions and requirements on the Indians in the fur trade where the two sides have the closest exchanges, in order to reduce their own costs. Before the British occupied the French colonies and implemented the high-pressure policy, the Indians had great freedom in the fur trade. As the main supplier of fur, they would sell fur to whomever they wanted to buy. Those who wanted to buy fur from Indians. If European fur traders want to do business with Indians, they must first please Indians. Generally, gifts are given to Indians as a friendly testimony before the official start of the transaction. The value of the gifts can be large or small, such as alcohol, tobacco, knives, snacks, and European handicrafts. The value of these gifts is generally not high. They are all gadgets, which are not worth mentioning in comparison with the income that fur dealers can get. However, the British, who have completely occupied the area now, regard giving gifts as the obedience of spending money to buy Indians. The colonial government believes that they are the only local buyers. Once the Indians cannot get gifts from themselves, they will be in order to obtain European goods. You can only hunt harder for fur, and then use fur to buy the goods you want with the British. So the British began to change, began to become unreasonable, began to become more and more greedy, began to become more and more aggressive, started to continue to expand westward. Detroit Castle and the other 12 military fortresses surrounding the Great Lakes area are a good example. www.wuxiaspa.com. These fortresses were originally used as fur trade fortresses. They became Britain after being occupied by the British in 1760, a bridgehead for expansion. For the Indians, the continued expansion of the British colony was an obvious threat to them. This couldn't be more clear. A British military officer reported that the natives say that we intend to use them as slaves because the British took their land. The contradiction between the Indians and the British is getting deeper and deeper. But because of the 7 Years' War, the Indian tribes living in the Great Lakes region were unable to unite against the British. But just in the third year after the British occupied the Detroit Fortress, that is, in 1763, when the Ottawa high priest Neilin, who was still in its heyday, said in a religious manifestation, "The Supreme Sun instruction, his people must reject European technology and liberate themselves from the business relationship with Europeans and dependence on alcohol. All the people of the Sun must wear the costumes of their ancestors and drive the British out of their own." territory. So, Pontiac, the chief of Ottawa, stood up. At that time, the Ottawas were very powerful, and they were also a well-known middleman tribe in the Great Lakes region. They were also a bridge between whites and more Western Indians. Ottawas would use low prices for goods in exchange for Western Indians' fur, and then sell them to high white people in the East. Earn the difference from it, so they are strong and have allies with many Indian tribes. The British probably never thought of how much trouble the Pontiac chief who stood up would cause them. Chapter 548, Pontiac Uprising. When looking at the Indian information in the previous life, Stone Bear had paid attention to the Pontiac chief. Chief Pontiac was born in 1720 and was assassinated in 1769. He lived only 49 years old. Although his life is short, when he was the chief of Ottawa, he gained a very high reputation among the Indians by virtue of relatively fair trade, especially when he took the lead and started fighting with the British. Many Indian warriors from other tribes left their tribes to join him, because he acted boldly and generously. Not only did he take the lead in fighting, but also there are also courageous and strategic, very good at using soldiers. During the Pontiac Uprising, Chief Pontiac even became the supreme leader of the tribal alliance composed of the Ottawa, Chippewa, and Miami tribes. At the turn of the spring and summer of 1763, Chief Pontiac led the Ottawas and contacted the Hurons, Miamis, Chippewas, and other Indians to siege Detroit, and at the same time captured the Great Lakes. 8 of the other fortresses killed hundreds of white colonists who invaded Indian territory. But just when the Indian Tribal Alliance was preparing to attack the Detroit fortress, their plan was leaked. They lost a lot of people when attacking the Detroit fortress, and eventually led to the failure of the plan to attack the Detroit fortress. Although Pontiac failed, this uprising made a good start for the resistance of other Indian tribes. More Indians stood up and responded to Pontiac's call. Instead of leading troops. To vote is to act alone to attack small groups of British colonists. In fact, at the beginning of the Pontiac Uprising, the British responded very slowly, thinking it was a small, low-intensity conflict, and did not pay much attention to it. After all, the Pontiac Uprising took place at the end of the 7 Years' War. At that time, most of the attention of the British was restrained by the French, and they did not pay much attention to the Indian Uprising. But the result surprised the British. Those natives who were regarded as ignorant and backward, took the 8 military fortresses in the Great Lakes region in one go, and almost took the most important fortress of Detroit. The British finally paid attention to the huge losses caused by the Indians. In the second half of 1763, the British began to actively mobilize troops to participate in the suppression of the Indian uprisings, and gradually suppressed the offensive of the local Indians. Although the British have a great advantage in the Great Lakes region, life is not easy for the British. After all, the British talents had just survived the traumatic 7 Years' War, and their finances were about to collapse and bankrupt. Otherwise they would not have nothing to do to squeeze the Indians. Now that the war has broken out again, the British Parliament lords can only think of ways to collect taxes while arranging troops and generals. Because the battlefield is in North America, the colonial residents have to pay for this money. This is also the direct reason for the continuous promulgation of various regulations used to squeeze the colonists by the British authorities after the 7 Years' War. At the same time, the British were also afraid that the war with the Indians would be delayed too long, which would cause the French to join the war again. Therefore, in order to quell the Indians' resistance as quickly as possible, even if the British army has begun to gain a strategic advantage, the London government still had to negotiate with the Indians, and then adjust the policies that some Indians strongly opposed, and liberalized some prohibitions, respect the traditions of the Indians. Finally, the King of England issued a special proclamation in October 1763, the Declaration of 1763, which met most of the requirements of the Indians. For example, private purchases of Indian land were not allowed, and British colonial settlers were not allowed to settle around the Great Lakes region and between the Allegheny Mountains and the Mississippi River. Those British people who have been in these areas have also been ordered to abandon their settlements on these lands and must move elsewhere. This declaration became the golden key to the settlement of the Indian problem and quelled this far-reaching war. However, the war did not end immediately because of the Declaration of 1763. Although many Indian tribes signed peace treaties with Britain after the declaration was issued by the British, the resistance of the Indians did not end until 1766. In July 1766, Chief Pontiac, who had obtained good results, represented the Indian Tribal Union in peace negotiations with the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom once again reiterated its respect for the territories and rights of the Indians, and the Indian Tribal Union promised not to launch any more attack. The two sides used to reach a peace agreement and end the war. The history of this war is called Pontiac Uprising. At this point, the Indian uprising finally came to an end. The Indians got what they wanted, but the British peace policy was a compromise in the eyes of the colonial residents, which caused the settlers and land speculators of the North American colonies to treat the United Kingdom strong opposition to government policy. In addition, the British government continued to forcibly transfer the financial resources consumed from the 7 Years' War in the Pontiac Uprising to the colonists, which made the North American colonists more and more hatred of the British authorities, which eventually led to the War of Independence, the outbreak. It can be said that the Pontiac Uprising was the first large-scale attack by North American Indians against British colonists, and it also became one of the fuels for the outbreak of the War of Independence. Although Chief Pontiac passed away as early as 1769, Stone Bear still has great respect for the legendary Ottawa chief. Later generations of America once had a very famous car, which seems to have something to do with the Pontiac chief, because the name of that car was Pontiac. Of course, this is not to say that Pontiac Automobiles was named in honor of the Pontiac chief. www.wuxiaspot.com. The real reason is this: because the United States has no history. After the founding of the United States, it always wanted to find some more ancient history for itself. So some Indian tribes or Indian chiefs who were famous in history became the objects of worship by many Americans in later generations. For example, the various types of helicopters used by American Army aviation are basically named directly after Indian tribes or chiefs. And Chief Pontiac, as a famous figure in North American history, naturally has many admirers. Many places in the United States in later generations are named after Pontiac. For example, there will be a small city in the northwest of Detroit called Pontiac. This small city is also an automobile industry center in Detroit, which mainly produces tractors, automobile bodies, and automobile parts. The name of this place is to commemorate the heroic Chief Pontiac who was assassinated in the end. In 1893, Edward Murphy founded a chaise company here, based on the name of the place at the time, and named it Pontiac Chaise Company. Later, Edward Murphy produced a 4-cylinder engine car in 1908, which was powerful and competitive, and thus developed rapidly. At the same time, it attracted the attention of William Durant, the founder of General Motors. During the talks, the Pontiac Chaise Company joined General Motors in 1909 and changed its name to Pontiac. And from 1926 to 1956, Pontiac cars have been marked with the heads of Native American Indians. And in 1949, Pontiac also launched a brand new model, named after the Pontiac chief. Chapter 549, My Bone Spear is best at leading soldiers to fight. Stone Bear really admired the Pontiac chief. But it is a pity that the chief was assassinated 7 years ago, and his legend can only become a legend. However, although Chief Pontiac is no longer there, Shi Xiong has no doubt that he can take over the baton of this great Indian chief and become the terminator of those European colonists. As the saying goes, the back wave of the Yangtze River pushes the front wave, and the front wave died on the beach. Although Chief Pontiac was not killed by himself, he is dead after all. This larger wave of his own will push all Indian tribes to complete the expulsion of European colonists, thus establishing an empire belonging to all Indians on this vast and fertile continent. The Indian massacre that occurred in the original historical time and space will not be restaged. Boss, what do you think?
Are you still worried that those Vasiku dare to avenge us? Bone Spear smiled and interrupted Shi Xiong's contemplation. Shi Xiong shook his head. No, I'm thinking about how to take down the Iroquois as soon as possible after the beginning of the spring. I also have to take advantage of those Vasichus to beat themselves, to occupy these Vasichus in the Great Lakes area. Drive all out. What's the problem with this, boss? As long as you give an order. Tomorrow I can lead someone to level this or other Detroit fortress. It's like we captured the Memphis fortress in the first place. Bone Spear patted his thick chest to fight. This guy looked steady, but in fact, like the 3rd Division's commander Mad Bull, he was also a warmonger through and through. Shi Xiong smiled and waved his hand and said, well, let alone those useless, it's not time to tear your face with the British. However, these British people can't jump on our turf. How long? The Bighorn Sheep and the Stone Bear have been mixing for a long time, so he naturally knows his own boss's thoughts, so he nodded and said, the boss is right. The British have done a lot of things and talents from Europe. Besides, our warship hasn't been launched yet, and the British still have the final say on the sea. At this time, if we turn our face with the British, they will get our necks stuck. Although we are not afraid of getting stuck in our necks, it is always uncomfortable. Therefore, as long as those British people honestly don't blow up, we don't need to take the initiative to tear our faces with them. Shi Xiong nodded in satisfaction. This Bighorn Sheep has indeed grown very quickly, and now he can stand at the high point of the overall situation and consider the problem. Bone Spear scratched his scalp and shook his head. You should consider these things. I listen to the boss's command. I will fight as the boss asks me to fight. Paused. Bone Spear's face showed a worried look. Boss, I let my brothers kill 14 Vasikus before. This won't affect your plan, right? Shi Xiong smiled and shook his head. It's okay. Those Vasichus must know why we are killing people. This incident is that they are not right. They dare not do anything. Moreover, their chief dare not take this report the matter, otherwise the seat under his will definitely not be kept. Besides, what if he reports it? The high-ranking British will not offend us because of the 14 colonists who seek death by themselves. The Bighorn Sheep also said, yes, the boss is right. At this time, the British are too late to win us. They absolutely dare not turn our faces with us, because the British know very well that if we join the Americans, by the way, the colonies they are here are 100% unprotected, and it is unknown how much their troops can withdraw. Bone Spear let out a sigh. Then I can rest assured. Bone Spear, you can rest assured, but you can't relax. Shi Xiong patted the strong man 7 or 8 years older than himself. The wind blowing from the north is not so cold anymore, and the snow on the ground is slowing down. It melts slowly. Another month or 2 is time for us to embark on the journey again. At that time, we will face the Iroquois, and our soldiers need to completely conquer the Iroquois. You 2nd Division, the teacher's responsibility is very heavy, so you can't relax. Bone Spear straightened his chest and raised his head and said, don't worry, boss, I'm the best at leading soldiers in wars. Like Bone Spear, the Stone Bear and the Bighorn Sheep laughed loudly. After laughing, the Bighorn Sheep knowingly tore out the map. The recuperation over the past few years has not only greatly improved the strength of the entire tribe, but also made tremendous progress in the military. For example, this kind of large-scale military map can't be as accurate as a few meters in later generations, but it can definitely be as accurate as 200 or 300 meters. This kind of accurate map was drawn by the professional map makers trained in the past few years and scouts with hot air balloons and the narration of local indigenous people. The accuracy is still very good. After all, there is no target that needs precise bombing at this time. Even if the division's artillery squad fires a volley, there are no observers in the hot air balloon in the sky. Therefore, the main function of this large-scale military map is to be used by the senior staff of the Grizzly Army, and it is essential for the senior staff of the Grizzly Army to develop tactics. A huge map is hung on the wall. I'm reading www.youcanchew.com. Shi Xiong pointed to the area where the 2nd Division is currently stationed, which is about 2 kilometers south of the Detroit Fortress, and said, The division of the 2nd Division must be stationed here because this section of the river is the narrowest cause, right? Bone Spear nodded and said, yes, this is the narrowest section of the Detroit River. It is most suitable to build a pontoon here. Moreover, it is close enough to the Detroit fortress, and our soldiers can go to the British if they have nothing to do. Frighten those British people. Several people laughed again. It's ridiculous to think about that scene. The British who were arrogant near the fortress of Detroit, they all looked high in the face of the Indians of other tribes. As a result, when the soldiers of the Grim Bear Army arrived, these British people immediately changed. It's a quail. After laughing, Shi Xiong continued to point to the map and said, when the army attacks, 2 or 3 regiments need to be left here to continue to be stationed. We must maintain vigilance and pressure on the British. How many people will be kept? Turn back. You two discussed. The other 2nd Division soldiers will depart from the Detroit fortress, cross the Detroit River and the Street Clair River to the north, and directly attack the Iroquois nest east along the land between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. Well, it's worth noting that when you arrive at the Niagara River, you have to choose a place to build the pontoon. There is a huge waterfall and the terrain is very dangerous. So I suggest you build the pontoon at the mouth of the upper reaches of the Niagara River. As for the mixed 8th Division, it will attack east along the south bank of Lake Erie and cooperate with you in the south. This time you attack the Iroquois. Your 2nd and mixed 8th Division will be the main force. Bone Spear waved his fist excitedly. Chapter 550, Colonel Alston. Colonel Alvin Alston is the highest military commander stationed in the Detroit Fortress. He also commands the other 4 military fortresses on the shores of Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, and Lake Huron. Was able to become a colonel in the Royal British Empire when he was only 31. This was not because of the outstanding military talents of this Colonel Alston, but because he had a good father. In fact, the family background of Colonel Alston can be seen from the surname Alston. Because of the surname Alston, it means noble birth in the British Empire. Colonel Alvin Alston indeed came from a large noble family, and his father was a real earl. It's a pity that Alvin Alston still has great difficulty in succeeding his father's earl title. It can even be said to be impossible, because there are 3 older brothers on top of him. Therefore, Alvin Alston wisely chose not to compete with his brothers for the title of Earl of Alston, but when he was preparing to go to university, he chose Sandhurst, who was just established for more than 20 years, the Royal Military Academy, and his choice was also strongly supported by his father, Earl Alston. Later, after graduation, Alvin Alston entered the Royal British Army directly, and with the support of his father, he developed rapidly in the army. At the age of 30, he had become a member of the Royal British Army, Lieutenant Colonel. The Alston family has a large industry, and there are many plantations in the 13 colonies in North America, and the Alston family also has a lot of power in the fur trade. During the 7 Years' War, the fur trade of the Alston family in the New World of North America was hit hard, and the subsequent Pontiac uprising almost completely broke the fur business of the Alston family. However, as the British began to take over the French turf and gained an overwhelming advantage over the Indians in the Great Lakes region, the fur business of the Alston family began to recover. Earl Alston saw the opportunity inside and started to operate. In 1771, Alvin Alston, who had just become a lieutenant colonel at the time, was dispatched to the New World of North America by the British Army. Of course, as compensation, his rank was once again promoted to become Colonel Alston. This year, Alvin Alston just passed his 31st birthday. Colonel Alvin Alston was not dispatched to the 13th colony on the East Coast, but went directly to the Great Lakes area, becoming the highest military commander of the Detroit Fortress, and the highest military commander of the other 4 fortresses. Colonel Alston knew exactly what he was being sent here for. He didn't come here to fight the local Indians, but to expand the family's fur business. Therefore, in the 4 years since taking office, Colonel Alston has had a good relationship with the surrounding Indian tribes. Whether it is Ottawa, Miami, Huron, Elena, or Chippewa, they are willing to sell the fur in their hands for this gentle Englishman. The fur business of the Alston family also developed rapidly after Alvin Alston became the top military commander of the Detroit Fortress. Last year, the Alston family became the largest fur trader in the entire United Kingdom. This is inseparable from the hard work of Alvin Alston. In order to reward his fourth son, the old Earl Alston even began to operate in the UK to make his fourth son a real general. Although the Alston family is very powerful in politics and business, its strength in the military is much weaker. And Alvin Alston's outstanding performance allowed the old Earl Alston to see the hope of the family establishing its own power in the military. It's not as good as the sky. Just when the operation of the old Earl Alston was about to be completed, the gunshots of Lexington changed the whole of Britain. The scheming Earl of Alston knew very well that if his son participated in the battle between the East and the colonists at this time, it would definitely be a very dangerous thing. On the contrary, if the son is still stationed in the Great Lakes region, it will be much safer. Furthermore, although His Majesty the King issued the Declaration of 1763 inches prohibiting colonists from continuing to expand westward, the British government and military will never let go of the 13 military fortresses in the Great Lakes that have already been acquired. Therefore, under the operation of the Earl of Alston, Alvin Alston continued to stay in the fortress of Detroit. Then the old Earl of Alston was ready to wait for a significant change in the war, before operating his son to gain military merit near the East Coast. In the cognition of the Earl of Alston, it is impossible for those hard-working colonists to defeat the powerful Royal Army and Navy. By then, as long as his son has an outstanding performance in a certain battle that is destined to win a big victory, then under the operation of the family, the son's general should not be able to escape. Old Earl Alston's plan, Alvin Alston naturally knew about it a long time ago. He himself didn't want to venture into the battlefield in the East at this time. It was really too dangerous. Far better than staying here safely. It's a pity, just when Colonel Alvin Alston thought that there could be no enemies here, an Indian native who was so huge that he almost frightened him suddenly came to Detroit Fortress. Colonel Alston was really scared to pee, because he witnessed with his own eyes how powerful this Cherokee army, called the 2nd Division of the Grim Bear Army, is, especially the kind of cannon that can hit miles and can produce violent explosions. It makes Colonel Alston almost think he is hell. How could there be such a powerful artillery in this world? And what they actually fired was a flour bomb. This is simply impossible. Even though the Detroit Fortress was stationed with a full 2,000 Royal Army of the British Empire, Colonel Alston did not dare to move at all. The staff under his staff wanted to test the intentions of these indigenous people and used pounds to entice more than 20 drunks to attack the indigenous camps. www.wuxiaspa.com and was unceremoniously directed by the indigenous people, 14 killed. This kind of toughness made Colonel Alston even more worried and frightened. He was deeply afraid that these Native Americans would level the Detroit Fortress if they disagree. After personally giving the order to remove the staff, Colonel Alston began to collect all the news about the Cherokee tribe, but the news he received made him even more frightened. This Indian tribe that rose in the south-central Appalachian Mountains has almost unified the New World of North America in just 10 years. Now they are preparing to wage war against the remaining Indian tribes entrenched in and north of the Great Lakes region. Obviously, this Cherokee tribe is preparing to unify the New World of North America. But if they really conquer all the remaining Cherokee tribes, will they expel the British Empire from this continent in the next step? Although the news that Colonel Alston got is that the kingdom has a good relationship with the Cherokee tribe, and the Ferguson rifle equipped in the army with an effective range of 200 years is said to have been developed by this tribe, and that a very light grenadier with an effective range of more than 600 yards was also developed by this tribe, but this does not mean that this tribe will not turn against the empire in the future. If that were the case, the Detroit Fortress where I was located would definitely become the first batch of targets to be destroyed. Now, it is said that the chief of the Cherokee is also here. Could it be? Colonel Alston suddenly made a decision in his heart. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.